The laptop screen went black at 11:47 p.m. on January 14th, 13 minutes before the college application deadline. I watched my stepdad Victor hold down the power button while simultaneously running his military-grade data wiper program from his USB drive. The one he bragged could erase a hard drive so clean, the FBI couldn't recover it. Worthless girls don't need features, he smirked, pulling out the USB once the program finished. Problem solved. My name is Athena. Ironic, naming me after the goddess of wisdom, then spending 17 years trying to destroy any trace of it. I sat there, staring at my dead laptop, the one that supposedly contained 12 college applications, 3 scholarship essays, and my entire portfolio for art school supplements. All that work, Mom said, entering my room with her signature weapon, a cup of coffee, black, scalding hot. She walked over to my desk where my external backup drive sat, its small blue light blinking innocently. Would be such a shame if something happened to this too. She poured the entire cup over the drive. Coffee seeped into every port, every crevice. The blue light flickered once, then died. Your dreams belong in the trash, she said, tossing the ruined drive into my waste paper basket, like you. I let my face crumble, let tears roll down my cheeks, let my hands shake as I reached for the laptop that would never turn on again. Inside, though, I was counting down the minutes until midnight, when 17 colleges would receive my applications, submitted 3 days ago from Mrs. Rodriguez's computer during our emergency counseling session. Please, I whispered, making my voice crack. The deadlines are in 12 minutes. Then you have 12 minutes to learn that dreams are for real daughters, Victor said, emphasis on real because I was the reminder of Mom's first marriage, the one to my father who died when I was 2. Not mistakes their mothers should have aborted. I worked so hard, I said, which was true. I had worked hard, on applications, on grades, on the elaborate deception that led to this moment. Hard work from worthless people is still worthless, Mom said, lighting a cigarette even though she knew the smoke made my asthma worse. Maybe now you'll focus on realistic goals, like marrying someone who'll tolerate you. Victor laughed. Even that's ambitious. They left me there with my dead electronics and fabricated devastation. I waited until I heard their bedroom door close, then pulled out my phone, the one they didn't know had hotspot capabilities, and opened my email. 17 confirmation emails. Your application has been received. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, MIT, plus 12 safety schools and targets, though calling them safety seemed wrong when you had a 4.9 GPA and perfect SATs. I scrolled to 3 days ago, to the email from Mrs. Rodriguez. All applications submitted successfully. Transcripts sent. Recommendation letters attached. Fee waivers approved based on documented household abuse. Your parents will never know. The backup drive in the trash? It was backed up to 3 different cloud services. The laptop. Everything was saved online since the moment I created it. But more importantly, neither device had any college application material on it for the past week. I'd scrubbed them clean, knowing this night would come. See, Victor had been telegraphing this move for months. Sure would be terrible if something happened to your computer right before deadlines, he'd say. Technology is so unreliable. Mom would add, remember when Cousin Beth's daughter lost all her applications? Had to take a gap year. Never did make it to college. So I prepared, like a chess player thinking 12 moves ahead. The next morning was Saturday. I came downstairs with swollen eyes from carefully applied vapor rub and sat at the breakfast table in defeated silence. No breakfast for failures, Victor said, reading his tablet. You can eat when you get a job to pay us back for 17 years of wasted resources. Speaking of which, Mom added, we've signed you up for shifts at Victor's warehouse. You start Monday. Might as well learn something useful. I nodded meekly. Yes, Mom. The first acceptance came Tuesday. I was at school when my phone buzzed. MIT, full ride, early action acceptance. I screenshot it and sent it to Mrs. Rodriguez, who replied with a string of celebration emojis. Don't react, she added. Stay in character. By Friday, I had 3 more acceptances. Yale, Stanford, Columbia. All with significant financial aid. But the one that mattered came the following Tuesday. Harvard, not just acceptance, the Robertson Scholarship. Full ride plus stipend, study abroad, research funding. The kind of scholarship they give to maybe 5 students a year. Mrs. Rodriguez actually cried when I showed her. "This is it," she said. "This is your freedom." We waited another week. Let the acceptances pile up. 17 applications, 15 acceptances, 12 full rides or near full rides. My safety schools were offering honors programs and merit scholarships. My reaches were competing with financial packages. Then came the article. The local newspaper ran a feature on college admissions from our high school. They'd interviewed the counselors about success stories. Mrs. Rodriguez had casually mentioned that one student had achieved something unprecedented: acceptance to every Ivy League school, all with significant aid. She didn't name me, she didn't have to. Victor saw it first. He was reading the Sunday paper when his face went from normal to purple in about 3 seconds. "Athena," he roared. I came downstairs, still playing the defeated daughter, shoulders slumped. He shoved the paper at me. "Explain this." I read it slowly, letting false confusion cross my face. "Someone got into all the Ivies? That's amazing. Someone from your schedule. We have a lot of smart kids." Mom snatched the paper, reading rapidly. Her face went white. "When our college decisions released." "March," I said truthfully. "Why?" "Because if you somehow," Victor started, then stopped. "You couldn't have." "I destroyed everything." "You did," I agreed. January 14th, 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes before deadline. The precision of my response made them pause. "Then whoa," Mom began. My phone rang. Mrs. Rodriguez calling on speaker from her office as we planned. "Athena, can you come to my office? We need to discuss your Harvard scholarship." Dead silence in the kitchen. "I'm sorry," I said into the phone, loud enough for them to hear. "What scholarship?" "The Robertson, you won it. Full ride plus stipend. Harvard wants to do a press release. Can you come in?" I looked at my parents, their faces cycling through confusion, rage, and disbelief. "How?" Victor whispered. I set down the phone. "Dreams aren't just for real daughters," I said quietly. "They're for smart daughters who back up their backups and have counselors who've been documenting abuse for 3 years. You couldn't have submitted." "I submitted everything January 11th, I interrupted, 3 days before you destroyed my laptop. From Mrs. Rodriguez's computer. With her help. Completely legal since I'm 17 and applying for emancipation based on educational sabotage." Mom threw her coffee mug at the wall. It shattered, leaving a brown stain. "You lying little." "I never lied," I said calmly. "You destroyed my laptop. You ruined my backup drive. Those things happened. You just destroyed them after my applications were already submitted." Victor lunged at me, but I was already backing away, phone recording. "Touch me and this goes to Harvard. They have a very strict policy about students coming from abusive homes. They provide extra support, counseling, and legal aid." He stopped, fists clenched. "You want to know the best part?" I asked. "Every school offered me aid specifically designated for students escaping abusive households. Apparently, destroying your child's college applications is considered educational abuse. Mrs. Rodriguez has been documenting everything, your threats, your comments about worthless girls. The plan to force me into warehouse work." "Get out," Mom hissed. "Gladly. I've been packed for 3 days." I went upstairs, grabbed the bag I'd hidden, and came back down. They were still standing there, frozen in their rage. "By the way," I said at the door, "the FBI can actually recover data from military-grade white drives. But they only need to if there had been something important on it. Mine just had a copy of my junior year essays and some music. The real applications were never on that laptop." The door slammed behind me, but I heard Victor roar and something else shatter. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting in her car at the corner, as planned. "You okay?" "I'm free," I said, and for the first time in years, I actually smiled. The emancipation went through in record time. The judge read the documentation, 3 years of recorded threats, the destroyed electronics, the attempt to force me into labor instead of college, and granted it immediately. "You orchestrated your own rescue," she told me privately. "That takes extraordinary intelligence and courage." Victor and Mom tried to contest it, claiming I'd manipulated the situation. But the security footage from our house, Victor had installed cameras everywhere. Not realizing they'd document his abuse, showed them destroying my property while laughing about ruining my future. Harvard flew me out for accepted students weekend. I met the other Robertson scholars, a refugee from Syria who taught herself calculus in a camp, a boy from rural Alabama who'd built a nuclear reactor in his garage, a girl from foster care who'd published 3 novels. "What's your story?" they asked. "I survived my parents trying to delete my future," I said, literally. The summer before college, I lived with Mrs. Rodriguez. She helped me prepare, both academically and emotionally. We bought dorm supplies with the stipend money. She taught me to cook, to budget, to exist without constant fear. The night before I left for Harvard, she handed me a gift, a new laptop. "No one can ever wipe this one," she said. "It's yours. Only yours." Victor sent one email, forwarded through my lawyer. "You owe us $289,000 for raising you." I replied with a link to the Harvard financial aid page, which showed that low-income families pay nothing. "Thanks for keeping me poor enough to qualify for a full ride." Mom never contacted me directly, but I heard from cousins that she told everyone I'd stolen my acceptance, that I'd hacked the system somehow. The truth was simpler and more painful for her. I'd just been smarter than they thought. My freshman year at Harvard, I founded a nonprofit called Backup Dreams. We help students in abusive households apply to college secretly, providing secure computers, fee waivers, and counselors willing to submit applications confidentially. We've helped 847 students so far. Every application is submitted in triplicate. Every document is backed up in 4 places. Every dream is protected from parents who think they own their children's futures. I graduated summa cum laude. Law school at Yale, full scholarship. Now I'm a civil rights attorney specializing in educational access cases. I sue parents who sabotage their children's futures. I win every time. The laptop Victor destroyed is in my office, displayed in a glass case. Below it, a placard. Destroyed January 14th, 11:47 p.m. Application submitted January 11th, 2:00 p.m. Dreams, intact. Next to it is the coffee-stained backup drive with its own placard. Backup of a backup of a backup. The dreams were never here. Mrs. Rodriguez comes to every important event: graduation, bar exam results, my first Supreme Court case. She's the mother I chose, not the one who poured coffee on my dreams. Sometimes young people contact me, terrified their parents will destroy their applications. I tell them what Mrs. Rodriguez told me. Dreams aren't stored on hard drives. They're stored in determination. And no amount of coffee or data wiping can destroy what lives in your mind. Victor's warehouse went bankrupt last year. Mom works retail. They never made it to any of my graduations, but I know they saw the pictures. Harvard's social media team loved the story of the girl whose parents deleted her dreams, but not her determination. The USB drive Victor used to wipe my laptop, I kept that too. Had it framed with a photo from my Harvard graduation. The inscription reads, "Military-grade wiper, couldn't wipe out a military-grade mind." They thought they were deleting my applications. They were actually deleting themselves from my success story. And unlike my applications, I didn't keep any backups of them.
The laughter was what got me first. Not the polite champagne-fueled chuckles from the reception hall, but a sharp, almost cackling sound coming from Ivy's bridal suite. It was late, past midnight, and most of the guests had stumbled off to their own rooms or Ubers. I was just heading back to my glorified broom closet, which the hotel generously called a single occupancy room with a garden view, if you count a dumpster as a garden, when I heard it. Before going further, drop your location in the comments. I'm curious about my global family. My name is Naomi Sanders. I'm 32, a financial analyst, and for the past year, I'd been the invisible hand behind my cousin Ivy's dream wedding. Ivy Daniels, 30, the family's golden girl, had always had a knack for making her dreams everyone else's responsibility. This wedding was no exception. From the sprawling vineyard venue to the hand-stitched, custom-designed bridal gown that cost more than my car, I'd footed the bill. All of it. I'd done it out of a misplaced sense of family loyalty, I suppose. Or maybe a desperate hope that if I gave enough, I'd finally be seen as more than just the responsible one who always had her life together, but never quite glowed like Ivy. I'd sat through endless dress fittings, feigning enthusiasm as Ivy, radiant in white, would turn to me and say, "Naomi, isn't this just divine? So glad you could make it happen." Her voice always had that subtle lilt, a hint of surprise that I, the quiet, practical cousin, could actually swing something so extravagant. I'd even brushed off the Airbnb mix-up for the bridal party. Ivy's maid of honor, Lana Grant, 36, had apparently booked a sprawling house for the bridesmaids, complete with a pool and a personal chef, my own accommodation, a pull-out couch in the living room, while the other bridesmaids, including Lana, got their own suites. "Oh, Naomi, I'm so sorry. There must have been a mix-up with the rooms," Ivy had chirped, not a hint of actual apology in her tone. "But you're such a good sport. I knew you wouldn't mind." I just smiled, a little too tightly, and said it was fine. It wasn't. Now, standing outside Ivy's suite, the laughter grew louder. I heard Lana's distinct, high-pitched giggle, then Ivy's deeper, more melodic laugh. A sliver of light escaped from the partially ajar door. Curiosity, or perhaps a masochistic impulse, made me pause. "Can you believe her?" Lana's voice, slurred with champagne, cut through the air. "Seriously, the whole backup bride thing? I thought I was going to die." My stomach dropped. Backup bride? I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob of my own room. Ivy snorted. "I know, right? Like she'd ever wear white. Naomi Sanders, the eternal bridesmaid, or in this case, the eternal bank account." A cold wave washed over me. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear. "But seriously," Lana continued, "that toast she gave? So earnest. To Ivy and Christian, may your love be as boundless as your future." Blah, 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 like she's giving a quarterly earnings report. Christian Hoffman, 33, Ivy's new husband, chimed in, his voice smooth and mocking. "Well, she is a financial analyst, darling. She probably calculated the exact ROI on her generosity." Ivy giggled again. "Oh, he gets it." And the way she kept looking at me, like she was expecting a medal or something. I mean, it's just money, right? It's not like she has anything else going on. Lana's voice was full of mock pity. "Poor Naomi. All that money and no one to spend it on, except, your wedding." "Exactly," Ivy exclaimed, the word dripping with venomous glee. "It's like she's trying to buy her way into our lives, as if we'd forget she's just Naomi." My eyes stung. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the deserted hallway. Just Naomi. The words echoed, a cruel, familiar refrain. All the little jabs, the subtle dismissals, the years of being overlooked, they coalesced into this one brutal, undeniable truth. They didn't see me. They saw a wallet, a convenience, a joke, the backup bride, the one who would never wear white. I backed away slowly, my feet numb, my mind a buzzing hive of betrayal. The laughter from the suite followed me, a mocking symphony. I didn't go to my room. I just walked blindly until I found myself outside, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the burning in my chest. The stars seemed to mock me, too, twinkling like tiny, judgmental eyes. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling. I opened the voice recorder app. My mind was racing, a cold, clear resolve solidifying amidst the pain. I had to remember this, every single word, because this wasn't just a slight. This was a declaration of war. And I, Naomi Sanders, the backup bride, was about to show them exactly what I was capable of. I didn't sleep that night, not a wink. I just sat on the edge of my sad little hotel bed, the city lights blurring outside my window, and played the recording over and over again. My phone screen glowed, a cruel beacon in the dark. Can you believe her? Seriously, the whole backup bride thing? Lana's voice, like she'd ever wear white. Naomi Sanders, the eternal bridesmaid. Or in this case, the eternal bank account. Ivy's voice, clear as a bell. She probably calculated the exact ROI on her generosity. Christian, it's like she's trying to buy her way into our lives, as if we'd forget she's just Naomi. Ivy again. Each word was a fresh cut. 1,000 paper cuts, as Summer would later call them. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the casual cruelty, the dismissive tone, the sheer joy in their voices as they dissected me. It wasn't a drunken slip. It was a performance, a private, hateful performance for an audience of 3. The recording wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. When I first heard Lana say, "backup bride," something in me snapped. I'd fumbled with my phone, heart pounding, and hit record just as Ivy started her line about eternal bank account. I'd captured the rest of their little post-toast party, every vile, condescending syllable. As the sun began to peek through the curtains, painting the room in a sickly gray light, I felt a familiar ache in my chest. It wasn't just the betrayal of last night. It was the weight of years. Years of being the sensible one, the quiet one, the one who always had her shit together while Ivy floated through life on a cloud of charm and other people's efforts. I remembered high school. Ivy, 2 years younger than me at 15, had set her sights on Mark, my crush since freshman year. I was 17. I'd confided in her, told her all about him. A week later, she was holding his hand in the hallway, giggling, while he shot me an awkward, apologetic glance. "Oh, Naomi, I'm so sorry. It just happened," she'd said, batting her eyelashes. It always just happened with Ivy. Then there was college. I'd spent months interning at a prestigious financial firm, busting my butt. I'd given Ivy, then 20, some tips for her own accounting internship interview, even helped her polish her resume. She got the spot, then casually mentioned to our aunt at a family dinner that she'd really nailed that interview, all thanks to my own research and a little bit of natural talent. I just sat there, chewing my steak, feeling the familiar sting of invisibility and the clothes. Oh, the clothes. "Naomi, can I borrow your black dress for Sarah's party? You look so good in it, but it would be perfect for me," she'd say, then return it weeks later, stained or stretched, if she returned it at all. I was 32 now, and still a part of me expected her to ask for something, take something, diminish something. I finally called Summer Wilson, my best friend since college. She was 32 too, and the only person who truly saw me, flaws and all. Her voice was groggy when she answered. "Naomi, what's wrong? It's 6 a.m. I didn't even say hello. I just played the recording. The silence on her end was deafening. When it finished, she let out a long, slow breath. "Naomi," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Oh, Naomi, I told you. I told you she was a user. I told you to walk away from this whole wedding circus." "I know," I whispered, tears finally blurring my vision. "I know you did. This is beyond. This is evil," Summer continued. "You need to cut her off. Block her. Change your number. Just disappear." But the thought of disappearing, of letting them win, of letting their words be the final verdict on my worth, made something hard and cold settle in my gut. Disappearing wasn't enough. They needed to understand the cost of their cruelty. I started thinking methodically, like the financial analyst I was. What did I have that they wanted? What was I in control of? Then it hit me. The honeymoon fund. Ivy, in a moment of rare, fleeting trust, or perhaps just laziness, had asked me to set up their honeymoon fund. She knew I was good with money, meticulous. I'd created a separate online account linked to a travel agency and deposited the initial $9,800 I'd promised them for their trip to Bora Bora. Guests could contribute directly, and I, as the account administrator, was the only one with full access. I was the executor. No one else had the login. No one else had the password. A slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. My fingers flew across the keyboard of my laptop, which I thankfully brought with me. I navigated to the fund's portal. The balance stared back at me. $14,250. My $90,800, plus various contributions from family and friends. My heart rate picked up, but this time it wasn't from pain. It was from a thrilling, terrifying sense of power. I clicked the transfer funds option. My account number was already linked. I typed in the full amount. A confirmation window popped up. Transfer $14,250 to Naomi Sanders. This action is irreversible. I stared at it for a long moment, the laughter from the recording echoing in my ears. The backup bride. The eternal bank account. My finger hovered over the mouse. Then, with a decisive click, I confirmed. The screen refreshed. Transaction complete. I leaned back, a breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaping my lips. The room was silent, save for the hum of the laptop. "Let's start your marriage with nothing," I whispered into the quiet, the words tasting like ash and victory. The transfer was instant. My bank account, usually a quiet, predictable entity, now held a cool $14,250 more than it had yesterday. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the principle, the sheer audacity of their mockery, fueled by my own generosity. This was about balance. The honeymoon was scheduled for 2 days after the wedding. Ivy and Christian were flying out of LAX, first class to Bora Bora. They'd booked the most expensive overwater bungalow, complete with a private plunge pool and a butler. I knew this because I'd helped them research it, smiling through gritted teeth as Ivy described her vision of paradise. I spent the next 48 hours in a strange detached state. I checked out of the hotel, drove home, and went through the motions of my regular life. I went to work, answered emails, analyzed data. But beneath the surface, a quiet storm was brewing. I didn't feel guilt, not yet. Just a chilling sense of purpose. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from family members congratulating me on the wedding, asking if I'd had fun. I replied with vague, polite answers. No one suspected a thing. My mother, Teresa Sanders, 58, called to gush about how beautiful Ivy looked. She didn't ask how I was. She never did. The day of Ivy and Christian's flight, I sat at my kitchen table, a fresh cup of coffee steaming beside me. I pulled out a crisp sheet of paper and a pen. The note had to be perfect. Not angry, not emotional, just precise. Dear Ivy and Christian, I hope you enjoyed your wedding, which I so generously funded. As for your honeymoon, I've taken the liberty of reallocating the funds. You see, I decided that the true gift you needed was not a lavish escape, but a priceless lesson in humility. Your original suite has been downgraded from the penthouse to a basic, non-refundable economy room. No champagne, no monogrammed robes, just scratchy sheets and vending machine peanuts. Consider it a taste of reality. Enjoy the priceless gift of humility. The backup bride. I folded the note neatly, slipped it into a plain white envelope, and addressed it to Ivy and Christian Hoffman. Then I called the airline. It wasn't difficult to make the changes. As the administrator of the honeymoon fund, I had access to their travel itinerary. I changed their first-class tickets to economy, non-refundable. I downgraded their overwater bungalow to the cheapest, most basic room available, one that, conveniently, was also non-refundable. The travel agent on the phone sounded confused, but my calm, firm voice, coupled with my administrator access, made her comply. I even made sure to cancel their pre-booked airport transfers and private excursions, replacing them with a note about public transport options. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? Immensely. I then called the hotel in Bora Bora. There's been a change in the reservation for the Hoffmans, I explained, my voice smooth. They'll be arriving today, but their new room is Suite 3B. And please, ensure this note is waiting for them upon check-in. I read the note aloud, slowly, clearly. The hotel staff, accustomed to unusual requests from high-paying clients, simply confirmed they would comply. The next few hours were agonizing. I imagined them arriving at LAX, expecting the red carpet, then finding their boarding passes for economy. I pictured their faces when they landed in paradise, only to be shunted into a cramped, basic room, no butler in sight. And then the note. The final, exquisite jab. My phone started ringing around 4 p.m. It was Ivy. I let it ring, then Christian, then Ivy again, and again, and again. 14 missed calls in total, spread across an hour. I watched them pile up, a small, grim smile playing on my lips. It was a symphony of their unraveling. I finally put my phone on silent. I knew the storm was coming. Around 7 p.m., as I was making myself a simple dinner, my phone buzzed with a notification. It wasn't a call. It was a social media update. Ivy. I opened the app. Her profile picture, usually a glamorous shot of her laughing, was now a somber selfie. Her eyes looked red-rimmed, her lips downturned. The caption read, "Some people only smile when they're ruining happiness." My heart gave a little jolt. It was cryptic enough not to immediately point to me, but pointed enough for those who knew her. I scrolled down. The comment section was already blowing up. "OMG, Ivy, what happened? Who hurt you, queen? Spill the tea. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Don't let anyone dim your sparkle." Then a text from Summer. "You have to see this comment thread. It's unhinged." I knew exactly what she meant. The first shot had been fired, and the war, I realized, had only just begun. Ivy's cryptic post was like dropping a match into a dry forest. Within hours, the family group chats were ablaze. My phone, which I'd put back on vibrate, was a constant tremor in my pocket. My mother, Teresa, was the first to call. Her voice was tight, a mixture of concern and thinly veiled accusation. "Naomi, what is going on with Ivy? She just called me, absolutely distraught. She said something about her honeymoon fund being empty. And a note. Did you know anything about this?" I feigned ignorance, my voice calm. "Mom, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I set up the fund for her, yes, but I haven't touched it since I made my initial deposit. Maybe she just misread something, or the travel agency made a mistake?" Teresa sighed, clearly not convinced. "Naomi, she was crying. She said someone ruined her honeymoon. She thinks it was deliberate." "Well, Mom, I'm sure it'll all get sorted out," I said, my tone dismissive. "I'm busy right now. I'll talk to you later." I hung up before she could press further. I knew she'd call Ivy back, and the narrative would shift. The next few days were a blur of escalating family drama. The Daniels and Sanders families, usually a united front, began to fracture. Group chats exploded with accusations and defenses. Aunt Carol, Ivy's mother and my mother's sister, was particularly vocal. "Who would do such a thing? To a newlywed couple? It's absolutely despicable," she posted, clearly aiming at me without naming names. My cousin, Trent Daniels, 34, Ivy's older brother, was one of the few who didn't immediately jump to conclusions. He privately messaged me, late one night. "Trent, Naomi, What happened? Me. What do you think happened, Trent? Trent. Ivy's saying someone drained their honeymoon fund and left a note. She's blaming you. Me. And what do you think? Trent. I think you've been pushed around a lot. For a long time. Me. So you believe her? Trent. I don't know what to believe, but I know Ivy, and I know you. You shouldn't have done it, but I get it. His message, raw and honest, was a small comfort. Trent had always been a bit of an outsider in the family's dynamic, too. He saw things. He just rarely acted on them. Then came the leak. I was scrolling through a local news aggregator on my lunch break, a week after the wedding, when I saw it. An anonymous post on a popular local forum titled Bridezilla's Private Rant Exposed. It detailed, word for word, Ivy's post-toast tirade, the backup bride comment, the eternal bank account jab, Christian's ROI comment. It was my recording, transcribed and shared for the world to see. The user who posted it was a newly created account, clearly a throwaway. Public sympathy, predictably, tilted toward me. The comments section was brutal. OMG, this poor cousin. She paid for the wedding and they trash talk her? The backup bride comment is so savage. Who even says that? Karma's a bitch, Ivy. Enjoy your basic room. This is why you don't bite the hand that feeds you. I hadn't leaked it. I hadn't even considered it. My revenge was meant to be private, precise. But someone else had taken my private humiliation and made it public. I had a suspicion it might have been Summer, but she denied it vehemently when I asked. Naomi, I wouldn't do that without talking to you first. But whoever did it, they're a hero. The family brunch was scheduled for the following Sunday, 2 weeks after the wedding. My mother, Teresa, had insisted on it, calling it a reconciliation meeting. I knew it was an ambush. Summer urged me not to go. It's a trap, Naomi. They're going to gang up on you. But I went. I needed to see their faces. I needed to feel the shift in the air. The atmosphere in Aunt Carol's dining room was thick with unspoken tension. Ivy and Christian sat at one end of the table, looking pale and subdued, a stark contrast to their wedding day glow. Lana, Ivy's maid of honor, sat beside Ivy, glaring daggers at me. Teresa tried to start with pleasantries, but the forced cheer quickly dissolved. Aunt Carol launched into a tearful monologue about Ivy's ruined honeymoon and the unimaginable cruelty of it all. Ivy sniffled dramatically into a napkin. Finally, Lana spoke, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. Well, at least Ivy isn't destined to be alone. Some people just don't have that kind of luck, do they? Her eyes flickered to me, a smug, knowing smirk playing on her lips. It was a direct hit, a callback to the backup bride comment, a reminder of their private mockery now made public. A hush fell over the table. All eyes were on me. I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks, but this time it wasn't shame. It was a cold, simmering rage. I met Lana's gaze, then Ivy's, then Christian's. My voice was steady, clear, and cut through the silence like a knife. Better alone, I said, my eyes fixed on Lana, then surrounded by bottom feeders. I pushed my chair back, the scrape echoing in the stunned silence. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving my untouched plate of quiche behind. The door clicked shut, leaving them in a silence far more deafening than any argument. Walking out of that brunch felt like shedding a skin. The silence I left behind was a physical thing, a vacuum where their judgment used to be. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of lightness, a vindication that tasted sweeter than any quiche. The family continued to buzz, of course. My mother called, distraught. Naomi, How could you say that to Lana and walk out like that? You've upset everyone. I just listened, let her vent, and then calmly stated, Mom, I'm not discussing this. My actions speak for themselves. She hung up, frustrated. Trent sent another text. That was epic, but maybe cool off a bit. I just sent back a shrug emoji. A few days later, a new piece of information surfaced. It came from an unlikely source. Martina Fox, a college friend of Ivy's who I vaguely knew. We weren't close, but we followed each other on social media. She posted a vague but pointed comment on one of Ivy's recent "Woe is me" posts. So glad I could help top off the fund, Ivy. Hope you guys figure out what happened. Top off the fund? My blood ran cold. I knew exactly how much was in that fund when I drained it. 14 T's and $250. My initial $9,800, plus contributions. If Martina had topped it off, it meant Ivy had asked her for more money, implying my initial contribution wasn't enough, or worse, that I hadn't paid it all out. This was a deeper betrayal. Ivy hadn't just mocked my generosity, she'd actively manipulated another friend, using me as a scapegoat. She'd made it seem like I was the one who hadn't fully funded the honeymoon, even after I'd given her nearly $10,000 of my own money. This wasn't just about being a backup bride. It was about a calculated, ongoing deception. I spent hours digging. I checked my bank statements, cross-referenced them with the original fund deposit. My $9,800 was clearly marked. I then remembered an email from the travel agency sent weeks before the wedding, confirming the total cost of the Bora Bora trip. It was around $18,000. My $90,800 plus guest contributions of $4,450, totaling 14 T's and $250, meant there was still a shortfall of nearly $4,000. Ivy had clearly gone over budget, then quietly asked Martina to cover the difference, likely telling her I hadn't paid the full amount. The audacity was breathtaking. Amidst this new wave of anger, an unexpected message popped up on my LinkedIn. It was from Xander Fox, 35. I vaguely remembered him from the wedding. He was Martina's older brother, a guest who'd been seated a few tables away from me. I remembered seeing him glance my way as I left the reception early, after hearing the toast. He had a kind face, a quiet intensity in his eyes. Xander. Hi, Naomi. Hope you don't mind me reaching out. I was at Ivy's wedding. Saw you leave early. Just wanted to say, I heard some things, and I'm really sorry you had to go through that. You seem like the only sane person there. I stared at the message. It was so direct, so sincere, so utterly unlike anything I'd received from anyone in my family. It was a lifeline in the chaos. Me. Thank you, Xander. That means a lot. Xander. No problem. If you ever want to talk or just get coffee, let me know. No pressure. His kindness was intriguing. It was a small, unexpected crack in the wall of my self-imposed isolation. But the real gut punch came a few days later. I was cleaning out old files on my laptop, looking for a receipt, when I stumbled upon an old chat log. It was a group chat, dating back 2 years, titled Naomi Bridesmaid Club. My stomach churned. I clicked it open. The messages scrolled by, a horrifying chronicle of their cruelty. Ivy, 2 years ago. OMG, Naomi just offered to pay for my dress. She's seriously the best ATM ever. Lana, 2 years ago. LOL, the backup bride comes through. Should we make her wear a money bag instead of a bouquet? Christian, 1.5 years ago. She thinks she's part of the inner circle now. Bless her heart. Ivy, 1 year ago. Just told Naomi I need help with the venue deposit. She didn't even blink. This is too easy. Lana, 6 months ago. Remember when she thought Mark liked her? She's so clueless. Ivy, 3 months ago. Gotta make sure Naomi feels super involved, so she keeps opening her wallet. We need to hit that Bora Bora budget after all. Christian, 1 month ago. She's like a corporate sponsor for our wedding. Just gotta keep her feeling valued enough to sign the checks. My breath hitched. It wasn't just a drunken toast. It was a 2-year-long conspiracy, a calculated plan to exploit my generosity, to string me along, all while mocking me behind my back. The backup bride nickname wasn't new. It was an inside joke they'd been sharing for years. They hadn't just used me. They delighted in it. They'd laughed at my earnestness, my desire to belong. The anger I'd felt before was a flicker compared to the inferno that now raged within me. This wasn't just about money or a ruined honeymoon. This was about a complete, utter dehumanization. I wasn't family to them. I was a mark, a source of endless amusement and funds. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about exposing the truth, and I knew exactly how I was going to do it. The Naomi Bridesmaid Club chat log was the final straw. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a blueprint of their contempt. My initial anger, sharp and hot, cooled into a chilling resolve. This wasn't about petty revenge anymore. This was about exposing a calculated, years-long manipulation. I knew I needed more than just a chat log. I needed Ivy's own voice, admitting to her cruelty. I needed to confront her, but on my terms. I called Ivy. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice wary. "Naomi, what do you want?" "I want to talk," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "Face to face, at your place, alone." There was a pause. "Why?" she asked, suspicion lacing her tone. "Because I think we need to clear the air," I replied, allowing a hint of feigned vulnerability to creep into my voice. "This family drama is getting out of control. I just want to understand." She hesitated, then, predictably, her ego won out. She probably thought I was coming to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to explain myself. "Fine," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. "Come over tomorrow afternoon. Christian won't be here." The next day, I dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too casual, just my usual understated self. Before I left, I made sure my phone was fully charged and the voice recorder app was ready. I slipped it into my pocket, the microphone subtly positioned. Ivy's house was still adorned with a few lingering wedding decorations, a wilting floral arrangement, a just married banner that looked ironically sad. She met me at the door, her expression a mix of defensiveness and a strange, almost pitying smirk. "Come in, Naomi," she said, leading me to her living room. The air was thick with unspoken tension. "So," she began, crossing her arms, "what's this about? Coming to apologize for ruining my honeymoon?" I sat down, my hands clasped in my lap. "No, Ivy. I'm here because I want to understand why you did it." Her brow furrowed. "Did what?" "Why you and Lana and Christian mocked me at your wedding," I said, my voice steady. "Why you called me the backup bride, the eternal bank account. Why you laughed about me trying to buy my way into your lives." Her eyes widened, a flicker of panic in them. "I don't know what you're talking about, Naomi. We were just having a private conversation. You shouldn't have been eavesdropping." "I heard you," I pressed, ignoring her deflection. "Every word. And it wasn't just that night, was it? It's been going on for years. The Naomi Bridesmaid Club, the jokes, the way you used me for money, all while making fun of me behind my back." Her face went pale. The smirk vanished, replaced by a mask of shock. How do you know about that?" "It doesn't matter how I know," I said, leaning forward slightly. "What matters is why. Why did you hate me so much, Ivy? After everything I did for you?" She stared at me, her usual charming facade crumbling. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape. Then a strange, almost defiant look settled on her face. Because it was easy, she blurted out, her voice rising. Because you were always just there, Eve. Always trying so hard. Always so earnest. It was funny, okay? It was funny to watch you try to fit in, to try to be part of things when you just weren't. You were always so serious, so boring. And you had money. It was convenient. My heart ached, but I kept my face neutral. So you enjoyed it? You enjoyed making me feel less than? She scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. Yeah, I did. It was a relief, honestly. Everyone always thought you were so perfect, so responsible. It was nice to have something on you, to know you were just pathetic, really, clinging to us because you had no one else. The words were a punch to the gut, but I held it together. This was what I needed, her unvarnished truth. Thank you, Ivy, I said, standing up. My voice was calm, almost chillingly so. That's all I needed to hear. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I pulled out my phone, stopped the recording, and slipped it back into my pocket. Just confirming what I already knew, I said, turning to leave. Naomi, what did you just do? She shrieked, jumping up. I ignored her, walking out the door and closing it softly behind me. As soon as I was in my car, I sent the recording. First to Summer, then to Trent, then to my mother, Teresa, and finally to a handful of other trusted relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins who had always seemed to treat me with a modicum of respect. I attached a short message, the truth, from Ivy's own mouth. The immediate aftermath was a flurry of calls and texts. Summer's message was just a string of fire emojis. Trent's was a simple, damn, Naomi, damn. My mother's call came an hour later. Her voice was broken, raw with emotion. Naomi, I heard it. Oh my God. I can't believe, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I always thought she was just being playful. I never realized, I never saw it. Her voice cracked. My own daughter. How could I have been so blind? Her words, filled with genuine remorse, were a surprising balm. It was the first time in my life my mother had truly seen me, truly understood the pain I carried. The extended family began withdrawing from Ivy. The group chats went silent. The tide had turned. 2 days later, a new bombshell dropped. I was scrolling through my news feed when I saw it. A high-profile couple's blog, known for its dramatic wedding stories, had published a new post. The headline screamed, "Wedding Nightmare of the Year, Groom's Family Accused of Honeymoon Fund Heist." My heart hammered. I clicked on it. The article detailed the story, from the lavish wedding to the drained honeymoon fund to the backup bride note. It even included snippets of the anonymous forum post that had leaked the wedding toast. And then I saw it. The couple, Ivy Daniels and Christian Hoffman, were left stranded. They had used their real names. I hadn't leaked this. I hadn't even considered going to the media. Someone else had. And this time, there was no denying it. Ivy and Christian's humiliation was now a national spectacle. The blog post went viral. Within days, Ivy and Christian were trending online, their faces plastered across various gossip sites. The comments were brutal, a collective outpouring of schadenfreude. Wedding Nightmare of the Year became their unwanted epitaph. I didn't know who leaked it, but I suspected it was someone with a deeper grudge than even mine, or perhaps someone who just enjoyed watching the entitled fall. Either way, it wasn't me, and I felt a perverse sense of satisfaction watching their carefully curated image shatter. Weeks passed. The family remained fractured. My mother, Teresa, was still reeling. She called me almost daily, not to scold, but to apologize, to lament her blindness, to try and bridge the chasm that had opened between us. For the first time, I felt like I had my mother back. Truly. Trent continued to text, offering quiet support. Ivy and Christian, meanwhile, went silent. No more cryptic social media posts, no more desperate calls. They were in hiding, licking their wounds. Then came the annual Sanders family barbecue. It was a tradition, held every summer at my Aunt Carol's house. Summer, my best friend, called me the day before. "Naomi, you're not going, right?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "It's going to be a bloodbath. They're going to try and corner you." "I'm going," I said, my voice firm. "I have to. This isn't just about them anymore. It's about me, and I'm not hiding." Summer sighed. "Just be careful. And don't let them get to you." The air at Aunt Carol's backyard was thick with smoke from the grill, and an even thicker layer of tension. Most of the family was there, but the usual boisterous chatter was replaced by hushed whispers and awkward silences. Ivy and Christian were there too, looking pale and drawn. They avoided my gaze. Lana, however, shot me venomous looks from across the yard. My mother greeted me with a tight hug, her eyes full of worry. Trent gave me a nod, a silent acknowledgement. I picked up a plate, but my appetite was gone. I just stood, observing, waiting. After an hour of forced small talk, Aunt Carol clapped her hands. "All right, everyone. Ivy has something she'd like to say." All eyes turned to Ivy. She stood beside Christian, who looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. Ivy, usually so poised, looked nervous. She cleared her throat. "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I know things have been difficult lately, and I just wanted to say I'm truly sorry for any pain I've caused. My words were thoughtless, and I deeply regret them. Christian and I have been through a lot, and we just want to move forward. We hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive us." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, a performance I'd seen 100 times. It was a plea for sympathy, a desperate attempt to reclaim her golden girl status. The family looked on, some with pity, some with skepticism. I took a deep breath. This was it. I walked to the center of the yard, my steps deliberate. All eyes turned to me. Ivy's eyes widened in alarm. Christian's jaw dropped. "Ivy," I said, my voice clear and strong, cutting through the silence. That was a very touching speech, but it lacked one crucial element: truth. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. My mother looked horrified. Lana looked furious. I pulled out my phone. "You said your words were thoughtless, but I have proof they were anything but." I pressed play. The first recording filled the air, amplified by my phone speaker, which I held high for everyone to hear. "Can you believe her? Seriously, the whole backup bride thing?" Lana's voice. "Like she'd ever wear white. Naomi Sanders, the eternal bridesmaid. Or, in this case, the eternal bank account." Ivy's voice, unmistakable. She probably calculated the exact ROI on her generosity. Christian. "It's like she's trying to buy her way into our lives, as if we'd forget she's just Naomi." Ivy again. The family listened in stunned silence. Faces paled, jaws hung open. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling in her eyes. Trent looked grim, but a flicker of something like respect crossed his face. I let the recording play to the end, then paused it. "That was from your wedding night, Ivy," I said, my voice steady. "A private toast, you thought? But it wasn't just a drunken mistake, was it? It was a pattern." I pressed play again. This time, it was the recording from my confrontation at her house. Because it was easy, Ivy's voice, raw and angry. Because you were always just there. Always trying so hard. Always so earnest. It was funny, okay? It was funny to watch you try to fit in. You just weren't. You were always so serious. So boring. And you had money. It was convenient. Yeah, I did. It was a relief, honestly. Everyone always thought you were so perfect, so responsible. It was nice to have something on you, to know you were just pathetic, really. Clinging to us because you had no one else. The silence that followed was absolute, crushing. You could hear a pin drop. Ivy's face was ashen, her eyes wide with terror and humiliation. Christian looked like he was about to vomit. Lana was frozen, her mouth agape. I turned directly to Ivy, my gaze unwavering. My voice was calm, but it carried the weight of years of suppressed pain. When you make someone the joke long enough, I said, my voice echoing in the shattered silence, don't be surprised when the punchline hits back. I lowered my phone, the recordings having done their work. I looked at my untouched plate of barbecue, then back at the stunned faces of my family. Without another word, I turned, walked past the silent, gaping crowd, and left the barbecue, my head held high. Weeks after the barbecue bombshell, a strange quiet settled over my life. It wasn't the silence of defeat, but the profound, echoing stillness that comes after a storm. I felt lighter. The weight of years of unspoken resentment, of being overlooked and used, had finally lifted. I didn't feel guilt, not really. Just a quiet, resolute vindication. The family was irrevocably fractured. My mother, Teresa, was still processing it all. She called me almost every day, her voice tinged with a raw, new vulnerability. Naomi, I can't believe I didn't see it, she'd say over and over. I'm so sorry, my love, for everything. It was the apology I'd unknowingly craved my entire life, finally delivered. Our relationship, once strained by Ivy's shadow, was slowly, tentatively rebuilding. Trent, my cousin, continued his quiet support. He didn't say much, but his texts were frequent and reassuring. You okay? Or thinking of you. It was enough. Other relatives, those who had heard the recordings or read the blog, reached out with messages of support or simply a stunned silence. Some, like Aunt Carol and Lana, ghosted me entirely. The family group chats, once a constant source of low-level anxiety, were now dormant. Then came the inevitable. A letter arrived addressed to me, a formal legal document. Ivy and Christian Hoffman were suing me for unlawful withdrawal of funds from their honeymoon account. They were demanding the full $14,250 back, plus damages for emotional distress and reputational harm. I almost laughed. They still didn't get it. I immediately called Summer. They're suing me, I told her, my voice calm. Called it, Summer said, her tone grim. But you've got this, Naomi. You have all the receipts. And I did. I had meticulously kept every single record. The initial agreement for me to administer the fund, the bank transfer receipts for my $9,800 deposit, the screenshots of the Naomi Bridesmaid Club chat log, and of course, the 2 damning audio recordings. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman Summer recommended, was confident. Ms. Sanders, this was a gift, given for a specific purpose. Their actions, particularly the documented malice and deception, constitute a clear breach. We can argue fraud, misrepresentation, and a host of other things. Frankly, they don't have a leg to stand on, especially with those recordings. The lawsuit was a desperate last-ditch effort from Ivy and Christian to reclaim some semblance of control, but it was legally bulletproof on my end. A few days later, Summer called me with another idea. Naomi, she said, you need to tell your story, not just to the family, but to everyone. You need to write a blog post. Reclaim the narrative. I hesitated. I'd never been one to air my dirty laundry publicly, but then I thought of the backup bride nickname, of the years of quiet humiliation. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about owning my truth. So I wrote it. I poured everything into it, from the initial excitement of funding the wedding to the gut-wrenching betrayal of the toast, the discovery of the Naomi Bridesmaid Club, and the final devastating confrontation. I titled it simply, The Backup Bride. Summer helped me edit it, her sharp eye catching every nuance. We published it on a popular personal blog platform. It went viral within hours. People shared it, commented on it, empathized with it. The anonymous forum post and the high-profile blog article had laid the groundwork, but my own words, raw and honest, resonated deeper. Thousands of comments poured in, from people who had experienced similar betrayals, from those who applauded my courage, and from those who simply felt a cathartic release in seeing justice served. The lawsuit eventually fizzled out. My lawyer sent them a cease and desist, threatening a countersuit for defamation and emotional distress, backed by my mountain of evidence. Ivy and Christian, facing public scorn and legal defeat, quietly dropped the case. They disappeared from social media, their lives, once so public, now shrouded in a silence of their own making. Weeks turned into a month. The initial uproar faded, replaced by a quiet hum of life. My phone buzzed. It was a notification, a new voicemail. Ivy. I saw her name, her number. I didn't even listen to it. I just pressed delete. The unread message vanished. A final, definitive cut. I sat on my balcony, watching the sun rise over the quiet city skyline. The air was cool, fresh. The world felt different. I was different. I was no longer the backup bride. I was just Naomi, stronger, clearer, and finally, truly free. My phone buzzed again. A text message. Xander? Lunch? I smiled. A genuine, unburdened smile. Me. Yes.
The smell of burnt hot dogs and cheap beer usually meant family. For me, Louisa, it usually meant another performance. I'm 34, and for the last 6 years, my life has been a silent, unpaid internship in childcare, thanks to my older brother, Kent. He's 39, charming on the surface, and utterly useless underneath. Before we continue, drop a comment with where you're watching from. I love seeing my global reach. This particular Sunday, we were at my mother Yvette's house, a small backyard BBQ. The kids were running around, sticky with soda and sunscreen. Thea, my eldest niece, 14 now, was trying to wrangle Edison, 6, away from the sprinkler. Cameron, 12, was sulking by the fence, probably because I'd told him to pick up his plate. Sella, 10, was quietly drawing on the patio, and Valentina, 8, was loudly demanding more potato salad. My life. Kent, meanwhile, was holding court by the grill, a beer in his hand, laughing a little too loudly at one of Gerard's jokes. Gerard, my stepfather, 66, was the only one in this family who ever really saw me, though he rarely said it out loud. He just had this way of looking at me, a silent nod that spoke volumes. I was refilling the chip bowl, trying to ignore the dull ache in my lower back, probably from carrying Edison to bed last night after he fell asleep on the couch, when Kent's voice cut through the backyard chatter. "You know, it's great Louisa's here to help out," he said. Not to me, but to a cousin I barely knew, loud enough for everyone to hear. He gestured vaguely in my direction with his beer bottle. "She's really got it made, living rent-free, no responsibilities beyond, helping with the kids." The backyard went silent. The sizzle of the grill, the distant hum of traffic, the kids' laughter, it all just stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Rent-free. No responsibilities. The words hung in the humid air, heavy and poisonous. I stood there, a bag of tortilla chips clutched in my hand, my face burning. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. My mother, Yvette, 62, fidgeted with her napkin, refusing to meet my gaze. Gerard just watched me, his expression unreadable. Kent, oblivious, or perhaps enjoying the discomfort, took a long swig of his beer. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the chips at his smug face. But I didn't. I never did. That's just who I was. Controlled, composed, swallowing the bitter pills of family duty. My mind, though, was a whirlwind. Rent-free, I saw flashes. The time Edison, barely a year old, had a fever of 104, and I sat up all night sponging him down, then took him to the ER at 3 a.m. because Kent was too tired after a late night. I missed my morning shift at the coffee shop. The endless piles of laundry, the tiny socks and stained shirts, the constant smell of baby formula and dirty diapers that clung to my apartment. The ballet recitals and soccer games I never missed, even when it meant sacrificing my own plans, my own social life. Valentina's first pirouette, Sella's shy smile when she scored a goal. Kent was usually late or didn't show at all. The grocery bills that dwarfed my own meager income, the school supplies, the doctor's visits, the new shoes every 6 months, because kids grow like weeds. The nights I spent tutoring Thea in math, or trying to talk Cameron through another one of his angry outbursts, telling him it wasn't his fault his mom left, that he was loved. 6 years. 6 years since their mother walked out, leaving 5 kids and a note. 6 years since Kent, my older brother, my responsible older brother, decided he was too busy finding himself to be a father. And who stepped in? Me, Louisa, the auntie who became a surrogate mom, a nanny, a therapist, a chauffeur, a chef, a tutor, a nurse, and a punching bag for Kent's convenient amnesia. I finally put the chip bag down, my hands trembling slightly. I didn't say a word. I just turned, walked back inside, past my mother's anxious face, past Gerard's steady gaze. I needed air. I needed to be alone. Later that night, back in my small apartment, the kids finally asleep in their makeshift beds, bunk beds in the living room, a mattress on the floor in my bedroom. The silence was deafening. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the dark room. My anger, usually a low simmering coal, had finally ignited into a roaring fire. I opened a new spreadsheet. The columns stared back at me. Date, item, description, cost. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. 6 years. 6 years of my life, my money, my sanity, all for a man who called me a mooch. A quiet, dangerous calm settled over me. Okay then, I whispered into the empty apartment, the words tasting like ash and iron. Let's do math. The spreadsheet became my world for the next 3 nights. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, not with the fire still burning in my gut. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kent's smirking face, heard his condescending words. Rent-free. The nerve. I started with the easy stuff. Bank statements. 6 years ago, when their mother left, Kent had moved out of their house and into a bachelor pad, leaving the kids with me in my already cramped 2-bedroom apartment. He'd promised to send money, of course. A grand total of $0 had ever materialized. My bank statements, however, told a different story. Direct debits for school fees, doctor's co-pays, new glasses for Cameron, braces for Thea. The numbers added up, line by painful line. Then came the receipts. I'm a saver, a hoarder of paper trails, a habit born from years of living paycheck to paycheck and needing to account for every single penny. I dug through old shoeboxes, dusty folders, even the glove compartment of my beat-up sedan. grocery store printouts, pharmacy slips, receipts for school uniforms, art supplies, birthday presents for 5 kids who deserved more than their father was willing to give. Each crumpled slip of paper was a small victory, a tangible piece of my sacrifice. Amazon confirmations were next. My email inbox became a goldmine. Diapers, baby wipes, formula, then Lego sets, books, clothes, shoes, endless streams of things kids needed and Kent never bothered to buy. Screenshots of emails from Thea's school about field trip fees, Cameron's soccer registration, Sella's violin lessons. I even found a screenshot of a text message from Kent 6 months after his ex-wife left, asking if I could spot him for his own rent because he was a little short this month. I'd sent him $500. It went on the list. Everything went on the list. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the rhythmic click-clack of the keys a soothing balm to my rage. Each entry was a memory, a small humiliation, a moment of quiet resentment I'd buried deep. I remembered the time, about 4 years ago, when I was trying to get a promotion at the marketing firm I worked for. It was a small bump in pay, but it would have made a huge difference. I'd been working my tail off, staying late, picking up extra shifts. Then Sella got a nasty stomach bug. Kent was out of town, probably on one of his spontaneous, vaguely defined business trips. I had to call in sick for 3 days straight. My manager, a woman named Jade, who used to be a friend, had laughed when I told her why I missed the promotion. "Guess you can't have it all, huh, Louisa?" she'd said, a cruel smirk on her face. "Not with all those kids." The promotion went to someone else. That lost income, the potential for a better life, it all felt like Kent's fault. I couldn't put it on the spreadsheet, but it fueled me. I remembered Kent, about a year after the kids came to live with me, scoffing at my part-time job at the local library. "Still playing librarian, Louisa?" he'd asked, a sneer in his voice. "Don't you want to, achieve something? Get a real career?" He'd said it while I was folding a pile of clean laundry, their laundry, and he was on his way out the door to meet friends for golf. I'd wanted to tell him that keeping 5 children fed, clothed, and sane was my real career, my real achievement. But I just bit my tongue. The spreadsheet grew. It wasn't just money, it was time. It was emotional labor. It was the countless hours of homework help, bedtime stories, scraped knees and broken hearts. It was the constant worry, the never-ending mental load of being responsible for 5 other human beings. I couldn't put a price on that, not really. But I could put a price on the tangible things, and the tangible things were adding up to an astronomical sum. By dawn on the 4th day, my eyes were gritty, my back ached, but the spreadsheet was complete. Every single item, from a $2.99 pack of crayons to a $500 emergency dental visit for Cameron, meticulously documented. Dates, descriptions, costs. It was all there. A 6-year ledger of my life, my sacrifice, my quiet fury. I formatted it cleanly, added a polite, professional-sounding cover letter explaining the attached invoice for services rendered and expenses incurred. No emotion, just facts. I attached the spreadsheet, converted to PDF, to an email. The recipient list was simple. Kent, my mother, Yvette, my stepfather, Gerard, and, for good measure, a few aunts and uncles who had been present at the BBQ and heard Kent's little performance. Everyone who needed to know. My finger hovered over the send button. This wasn't just an invoice. This was a bomb. It was the truth, laid bare for everyone to see. There was no going back. I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like it's pulling air from the bottom of your feet, and then, with a click that echoed in the silent apartment, I hit send. Less than 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Kent. "Are you insane?" Kent's text, "Are you insane?" was the opening act. The main show was Sunday brunch. My mother, Yvette, insisted on weekly family brunches. Usually they were a chore, a performance of forced pleasantries. This one, however, promised to be different. I arrived with the kids, who were oblivious to the impending storm, chattering about the pancakes they hoped Yvette would make. Thea, at 14, was starting to pick up on the tension, her eyes darting between the adults. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift. The usual cacophony of family chatter was muted. My Aunt Carol, usually loud and boisterous, just gave me a tight, almost fearful smile. Uncle Mark avoided my gaze entirely. Yvette was fussing with the coffee pot, her back to me. Only Gerard, my stepfather, met my eyes, a small, encouraging nod. He knew. Kent, predictably, was the first to speak. He stood up from the dining table, a crumpled printout of my invoice clutched in his hand. His face was a mottled red, a vein throbbing in his temple. "Louisa," he began, his voice dangerously low. "What is this?" He thrust the paper forward. The kids, sensing the shift, quieted down. Sella, 10, hugged my leg. Valentina, 8, stared at her father, her usual boisterousness replaced by a wary silence. "It's an invoice, Kent," I said, my voice calm even, "for services rendered, as detailed in the email." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "An invoice? Are you serious? This is crazy. You think I owe you this much?" He unfolded the paper, shaking it slightly. $78,452.16. For what? For being an aunt? For helping out family? He looked around the table, expecting universal outrage, expecting them to join him in ridiculing me. My mother, Yvette, 62, wrung her hands. "Louisa, dear, maybe this is a bit extreme," she murmured, not looking at me. Aunt Carol chimed in. "It's a bit much, isn't it, Louisa?" "Family helps family." I didn't react. I just stood there watching them. This was the moment. Then Gerard, 66, cleared his throat. He'd been sitting quietly, reading his own copy of the invoice, his brow furrowed. He slowly folded the paper, placed it neatly on the table, and looked directly at Kent. "She's right," he said. The silence that followed was so profound, you could hear the distant chirping of birds outside. Kent's jaw dropped. Yvette gasped. Aunt Carol looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What?" Kent spluttered. "Gerard, are you serious? She's trying to extort me." Gerard's voice was steady, calm, cutting through Kent's bluster. "She's not extorting you, Kent. She's presenting a bill. For 6 years of taking care of your children, for expenses you never covered, for responsibilities you abdicated. It's all here. Every single receipt, every single date. It's meticulous." He tapped the invoice. "And frankly, 78,000 is probably on the low side for what she's actually done." Chaos erupted. Kent started yelling, his face contorting in a furious mask. "You're taking her side after everything? She's trying to ruin me." Yvette finally found her voice, a shaky whisper. "Gerard, please, don't inflame things." But Gerard just looked at me, a silent message of support. I didn't need to stay. My message had been delivered. The truth was out there. I looked at the kids. Thea's eyes were wide, taking everything in. Cameron looked confused, but also a little angry, probably at his dad. Salah and Valentina were clinging to me. Edison, 6, was oblivious, playing with a toy car on the floor. "I think we're done here," I said, my voice clear and firm. I took Sella and Valentina's hands. "Kids, let's go." As I turned to leave, Kent shouted, "You'll regret this, Louisa. You'll regret trying to destroy this family." I didn't look back. I just walked out, the kids trailing behind me. As we reached the car, Sella and Valentina both hugged me tightly, burying their faces in my side. I knelt down, wrapping my arms around them. "It's okay, girls," I whispered, though my heart was still thundering. Everything's going to be okay. Later that evening, after I'd tucked the younger ones into bed, Thea came into the kitchen where I was making tea. She was quiet, her usual teenage aloofness replaced by a thoughtful solemnity. She watched me for a moment, then pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. "Auntie Louisa," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is for you." She pressed the note into my hand, and then, without another word, turned and went to her room. I unfolded the paper. In Thea's neat, careful handwriting, it read, "He lies a lot." The next morning, my phone rang. It was Yvette. "Louisa," she said, her voice strained. "Can you meet me? I need to tell you something about Kent." "Something you need to know?" My mother, Yvette, wanted to meet at a quiet coffee shop, not her house. That alone told me this wasn't going to be a casual chat. She arrived looking haggard, her usual perfectly coiffed hair a little disheveled. She ordered a black coffee, something she only did when she was truly stressed. "Louisa," she started, her voice barely a whisper, "I know you're angry, and I know Kent. He can be difficult." "Difficult?" I raised an eyebrow. "He publicly shamed me for taking care of his children, Mom. Then he called me insane for asking him to acknowledge it." She flinched. "I know. And Jared was right what he said at brunch. You've done so much, more than any of us could have asked." She took a deep, shaky breath. "That's why I have to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago. Something about your father." My father had passed away when I was 18, just before I started college. Kent was 23. It had been sudden, a heart attack. He'd left a small life insurance policy. I remembered it being split between Mom and us kids, but the details had always been fuzzy. Kent had handled everything, of course. He was the older brother, the responsible one. "What about Dad?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. Yvette looked down at her coffee cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "When your father died, he left a life insurance policy. It was substantial. He wanted it to be split evenly between you and Kent, 50-50. He always said he wanted to make sure both his children had a good start, especially with you going to college." My blood ran cold. 50-50? Mom, I barely got anything. Kent told me it was a small policy and that most of it went to you and a little bit to us, but that he handled my share by paying for my first year of college tuition directly. Yvette finally looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. He told me the same thing. He said he'd spoken to you and you'd agreed to let him manage your portion. He said you weren't dependable with money, that you'd just blow it on something silly. He said he'd invest it for you and give you access when you needed it. He even showed me a fake document, a signed agreement he'd supposedly gotten from you. "A fake document?" I repeated, my voice flat. My father had left me a substantial inheritance, and Kent had stolen it? Not just stolen it, but painted me as irresponsible to my own mother? The betrayal was a physical blow. "Yes," she whispered. "He siphoned off your entire share, all of it. He told me he was using it to invest for you, but it was just gone. He used it for himself. He bought that first bachelor apartment with it, the one he moved into when his wife left. He claimed it was seed money for a business venture that never materialized. He got over $100,000, Louisa, all of it. He said he'd paid for your first year of college, but that was from a separate small trust your grandmother left you, not from your father's policy. $100,000, my share, my father's legacy, meant to give me a good start, and Kent had just taken it. It wasn't just the $78,452 16s I'd spent on his kids. It was this. This was a whole new level of calculated deceit. It explained so much. his easy confidence, his lack of financial worry even after his wife left, his constant judgment of my low-paying jobs. He'd been living off my inheritance. "Why, Mum?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Why did you let him?" She wrung her hands. "He was so convincing, Louisa. He always was. He was so good at making me believe he was doing the right thing, that he was protecting you. And after your father died, he was all I had left of him, you know, my firstborn. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe he was looking out for you." Her eyes welled up. "I'm so sorry, honey. I'm so, so sorry." I stared at her, the years of Kent's favoritism suddenly making perfect, sickening sense. She hadn't just enabled him. She'd been manipulated by him too. But her confession, while painful, also gave me a new kind of clarity and a new kind of rage. "Dad had an old email account," I said, thinking aloud. "A really old one from before he got his work email. He used it for personal stuff. I remember him saying he kept important documents there, just in case." I left the coffee shop feeling a strange mix of devastation and fierce determination. The $78,452.16 was one thing. This was another entirely. This was my father's trust, his last gift, stolen. Back at my apartment after the kids were asleep, I logged onto my old desktop computer, the one I hadn't used in years. I remembered the email address. It was an obscure, old-school domain. After a few tries, I remembered the password, a combination of Dad's favorite sports team and my birth year. The inbox was a time capsule. Old newsletters, spam from a decade ago, and then a folder, labeled important. My heart pounded. I clicked it open. There were financial statements, old photos, scanned copies of wills, and then, buried among them, a file. Its title hit me like a physical blow. Louisa Custody Petition, Draft. The file labeled Louisa Custody Petition, Draft, felt like a shard of glass in my hand. My father, gone for 16 years, was still full of surprises. I clicked it open, my breath catching in my throat. It was a legal document, dated roughly a year before he died. A draft petition for guardianship, clearly drawn up by a lawyer. The petitioner was my father. The proposed guardian, Louisa Ray. The proposed wards, Thea, Cameron, Sella, Valentina, and Edison Ray, my nieces and nephews. The document outlined concerns about Kent's unstable financial habits, lack of consistent employment, and demonstrated inability to prioritize familial responsibilities. It detailed instances of his unreliability, his tendency to disappear, his gambling debts. My father had been watching. He'd seen it all. And then, the most shocking part, the petition stated that in the event of Kent's continued failure, or if his wife, the children's mother, were to leave, my father wished for me to be granted custody, not Kent's parents, not other relatives, me, Louisa. The document explicitly stated my father's belief in my maturity, strong moral character, and unwavering sense of responsibility. It mentioned my consistent care for the children during periods of Kent's absence. I wasn't a last resort. I was Plan A. My father had seen this coming. He had tried to protect them, and me. The world tilted. All these years I'd been told, implicitly and explicitly, that I was just helping out, that I was the kind aunt who stepped in because no one else was available. Kent had always framed it as his generosity, letting me live with them, allowing me to bond with the kids. My mother had always enabled that narrative, but my father, the quiet, observant man I'd loved so much, had known. He'd known Kent, and he'd chosen me. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about justice. For my father, for me, and most importantly, for these kids. I called Kent. Family dinner, I said, my voice deceptively calm. At Mom's. Be there. He sputtered. What? Why? Are you going to try and extort me again? Just be there, Kent, I repeated, and hung up before he could argue. The dinner was a tense affair. Yvette looked nervous. Gerard was his usual quiet, supportive self. Kent arrived late, radiating annoyance. The kids were there, as I'd insisted. Thea, Cameron, Selah, Valentina, and Edison. They needed to hear this. After we'd finished eating and the younger kids were distracted with dessert, I cleared my throat. Everyone looked at me. Kent, I began, my voice steady. I found something Dad left. Kent scoffed. What, another one of your imaginary invoices? I ignored him. I pulled out my phone, which had the scanned document saved. This is a draft custody petition from Dad, dated 16 years ago. I looked at my mother. Her face went pale. It names me, I continued, my eyes fixed on Kent, as the proposed guardian for all 5 children in the event of your continued irresponsibility or your wife leaving. Kent's face went from annoyed to shocked to furious. That's a lie. You forged that. Dad would never. He would, I interrupted, my voice rising slightly, the years of suppressed anger finally bubbling to the surface. He knew you, Kent. He knew your unstable financial habits, your lack of consistent employment, your inability to prioritize familial responsibilities. He saw it all. He knew you'd abandon your kids, just like you abandoned your responsibilities when he died by stealing my inheritance. Yvette gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Gerard put a comforting hand on her arm. He wanted me to have them, I said, looking at each of the children. He believed in me. He trusted me to protect you. Selah, who had been listening intently, her sweet face crumpled. Her eyes welled up, and she started to cry, a soft, heartbroken sound. Dad never wanted us, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Kent exploded. Louisa, you manipulative witch. You're filling their heads with lies. You're trying to turn my own children against me. He lunged across the table, his face red with rage. You're sick. You're absolutely sick. Before he could reach me, before anyone could react, Thea, my 14-year-old niece, stood up. Her voice, usually soft and hesitant, was clear and firm. She looked at her father, her eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and profound disappointment. We don't want to live with you anymore, she said. Thea's words hung in the air, sharp and clear, slicing through the tension. We don't want to live with you anymore. Kent froze, his rage momentarily replaced by stunned disbelief. Thea, what are you saying? This is Louisa putting ideas in your head. Thea didn't back down. Her chin was set, a mirror of my own stubbornness. No, Dad. It's what I'm saying. We never wanted to live with you. You're never there. Auntie Louisa is always there. Selah, still tear-streaked, nodded vigorously. Cameron, 12, who usually just acted out, looked directly at Kent. You yelled at me for breaking a plate, but you never even came to my soccer game when I scored the winning goal. Valentina, 8, piped up, her little voice surprisingly loud. You forgot my birthday last year. Auntie Louisa made me a cake and got me a unicorn. Edison, 6, who had been quietly coloring, looked up, his eyes wide. Auntie Louisa always reads me stories. Kent looked like he'd been slapped. He turned to me, his face contorted in a desperate plea. Louisa, please, don't do this. Don't let them say these things. We're family. We can fix this. Just let it go. His voice was suddenly soft, almost begging. The manipulative charm was back, but it was thin, transparent. I just looked at him. You think this is about me, Kent? You think I'm doing this? They're telling you their truth. The truth you've ignored for 6 years. He tried to argue, to cajole, to threaten, but the dam had broken. The children, one by one, started confiding in me over the next few days. Not just the little slights, but the deeper hurts. Thea, her voice quiet and burdened, told me about the nights Kent would come home late, smelling of alcohol, and yell at her for not keeping the younger kids quiet enough. He slapped Edison once, Auntie Louisa, she whispered, her eyes wide with remembered fear. Just a quick one on the back of his head because Edison wouldn't stop crying. Edison was only 3. Cameron, during one of our late-night talks, admitted he'd always felt like a burden. When Mom left, Dad said it was because he couldn't handle us anymore. I thought it was my fault, because I was always getting into trouble. My heart ached for him. I told him again that it wasn't his fault, that his mother's choices were hers alone, and that he was a good kid. Selah, my sweet, quiet Selah, started calling me Mom without prompting. She'd just slip it in naturally. Mom, can I have a snack? Or, Mom, will you read to me? It was a small thing, but it cracked open something in my chest. It felt right. Valentina, the firecracker, told me about the time she fell off her bike and broke her arm when she was 6. Kent had been home, but he'd been on the phone, too busy to take her to the hospital. I'd rushed her there, my heart in my throat, and stayed with her through the x-rays and the cast. He just told me to be quiet, she said, her little face serious. You held my hand the whole time. Edison, the youngest, clung to me even more. He didn't have clear memories of his mother, just a vague sense of absence. For him, I was the constant, the safe harbor. He started calling me Mama. My apartment, already overflowing, felt more crowded than ever, but also fuller, warmer. The kids were healing, slowly, starting to trust that their truth wouldn't be dismissed. But I was unraveling. The constant emotional labor, the years of suppressed anger, the weight of their confessions, it was taking its toll. I was exhausted, my nerves frayed. One afternoon, I was at work, trying to focus on a new marketing campaign, when my co-worker, Felix Cooper, 35, walked over. He was a quiet guy, sharp, with a kind smile. We'd worked together for a couple of years, mostly exchanging polite pleasantries. He'd noticed my increasingly tired eyes, the faint tremor in my hands when I held my coffee cup. Hey, Louisa, he said, his voice soft. You okay? You look like you haven't slept in a week. I managed a weak smile. Just family stuff. It's a lot. He nodded, leaning against my cubicle wall. I get it. Family can be a lot. Look, I don't know what's going on, but if you ever need to talk or just need a break, even just for an hour, my offer stands, no questions asked. He paused. You've got a lot on your plate. You don't have to carry it all alone. His offer was simple, unexpected, and utterly genuine. It was the first time in years an adult, outside of Gerard, had offered me real, unconditional support. My first instinct was to resist, to say I was fine, to pull back into my usual self-reliant shell. But his eyes were kind, and I was so tired. I just nodded, a silent acknowledgement. Later that week, as I was finally starting to feel a tiny bit of hope, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, expecting a telemarketer. Hello, Ms. Ray, a professional voice said. This is Attorney Miller. I'm calling regarding a formal custody inquiry that was made under your name concerning the Ray children. Hello, Ms. Ray. This is Attorney Miller. I'm calling regarding a formal custody inquiry that was made under your name concerning the Ray children. My heart leaped into my throat. A custody inquiry? When? Who? It appears to be an old inquiry, Ms. Ray, Attorney Miller explained, her voice calm and professional. From about 16 years ago. It was never formally filed, just drafted. but it came across my desk as part of a routine review of dormant files. Given the recent family developments, I thought it prudent to reach out. It was the draft petition from my father, the one I'd found in his old email. It had been sitting there, a ghost of a plan, waiting for me to find it. And now, through some administrative quirk, it had resurfaced. It wasn't a coincidence, not really. It was a paper trail, a legal breadcrumb leading to this moment. "Thank you for calling, Attorney Miller," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'd like to make that inquiry real." I used the principle of the 78,452.16 I was owed, the money I knew I'd never see, to pay Attorney Miller's retainer. It felt like a poetic justice. The money Kent had forced me to spend on his children would now be used to secure their future away from him. The process was daunting. Petitions, affidavits, court dates. Kent, of course, went ballistic. He called me every name under the sun, threatened me, tried to intimidate me. He even tried to involve Child Protective Services, claiming I was an unfit guardian, that my apartment was too small, that I was mentally unstable after the insane invoice. It backfired spectacularly. When CPS caseworkers arrived at my apartment, Thea, 14, was the first to speak. She calmly and eloquently explained the living situation, the care I provided, and her father's neglect. Cameron, 12, usually sullen, spoke up about how I helped him with his homework and listened to his problems. Sela, 10, and Valentina, 8, hugged my legs, telling the caseworkers how much they loved Auntie Louisa. Even Edison, 6, piped up, "Mama makes the best pancakes." The caseworkers left, clearly unimpressed by Kent's accusations. The court hearing was a blur of legal jargon and emotional testimony. Kent, true to form, tried to charm the judge, painting himself as a loving, if misunderstood father. He downplayed his absences, denied the financial neglect, and tried to discredit me as an overly emotional family member. But then Gerard, my stepfather, took the stand. He was 66, a man of few words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. He testified to Kent's long-standing pattern of irresponsibility, his financial mismanagement, and his consistent absence from the children's lives. He spoke about how I, Louisa, had consistently been the primary caregiver, the one who showed up, the one who paid. He spoke about my father's original intentions, how he had always seen me as the dependable one. His testimony was quiet, damning, and utterly believable. The children, too, were interviewed by the judge in chambers. I wasn't present, but I could imagine their honest, unvarnished accounts of life with Kent versus life with me. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Louisa Ray was granted shared legal custody and primary weekday physical care of Thea, Cameron, Sela, Valentina, and Edison Ray. Kent was granted weekend visitation and was ordered to pay child support, the amount calculated based on his income and the children's needs, and to reimburse me for a portion of the past expenses, though not the full $78,152.16. The judge stated that while the full amount couldn't be legally enforced as a debt, my detailed invoice had clearly demonstrated a pattern of financial abandonment that weighed heavily in my favor regarding custody. The gavel came down, a final resounding thud. It was over. A few days later, the kids moved in. My small 2-bedroom apartment, already bursting at the seams, was now officially home to 6 people. Mattresses were stacked to the ceiling in the living room, making it a giant sleepover fort. My bedroom became a shared space for Sela, Valentina, and Edison, while Thea and Cameron took the bunk beds in the second bedroom. It was chaotic, cramped, and utterly glorious. I watched them, my nieces and nephews, my children now, laughing as they tried to figure out where to put their limited belongings. Thea was helping Cameron organize his books. Sela was carefully arranging her drawings on the wall. Valentina was already decorating her corner of the room with glitter stickers. Edison was curled up on my lap, half asleep. I looked around my tiny, overflowing apartment at the faces of these children who were finally, truly safe. And for the first time in my life, after years of feeling undervalued and taken for granted, I felt rich. Not with money, but with purpose, with love, with a profound sense of rightness. This was what I was meant to do. This was my family, redefined. Months passed. My small apartment, once merely cramped, now buzzed with the constant hum of life. School mornings were a symphony of clattering cereal bowls, frantic searches for missing socks, and the occasional argument over who got the bathroom first. Evenings were a whirlwind of homework, dinner, and bedtime stories. The mattresses stacked in the living room were now a permanent fixture, a testament to our new, chaotic, beautiful normal. Kent predictably spiraled. His weekend visits, mandated by the court, were often cut short, or he'd cancel last minute, citing vague emergencies. He called me incessantly at first, blaming me for everything, his dwindling social life, his financial woes, despite the court-ordered child support, which he paid begrudgingly and often late, his inability to focus on his career. He was useless without someone to lean on, someone to enable him, someone to clean up his messes. Without me, he was just Kent. And it turned out that wasn't enough. He tried to turn the extended family against me again, but the truth had already done its work. My mother, Yvette, still struggled with her guilt, but she started visiting more often, bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting quietly with me while the kids played. She never defended Kent anymore. Gerard, my stepfather, remained my quiet anchor, always there with a knowing look or a practical suggestion. He'd even helped me build some makeshift shelves for the kids' overflowing books. I was exhausted, bone-deep tired in a way I hadn't known was possible. There were days I wanted to scream, to just curl up in a ball and sleep for a week. But then I'd see Thea, now thriving in school, her quiet confidence blooming. I'd watch Cameron, still prone to outbursts but now open to talking them through, finally finding his footing. Sella, my sweet, quiet girl, had discovered a love for ballet, her movements graceful and sure. Valentina, the firecracker, was still loud and opinionated, but her loyalty to me was fierce and unwavering. And Edison, my little shadow, was growing taller, his laughter filling the apartment, his memories of his father's neglect fading, replaced by the constant presence of Mama. I wasn't just surviving. I was glowing. This wasn't the life I'd planned at 34, but it was my life, chosen and fought for. I hadn't destroyed the family, as Kent had accused. I'd simply told the truth, and in doing so, I'd rebuilt it on a foundation of honesty and genuine care. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Felix came over. He'd become a quiet, steady presence in my life. We'd started getting coffee after work, then dinner. He never pried, but he listened, really listened, to the chaos and the triumphs of my days. He'd even brought over a huge box of hand-me-down books from his nieces and nephews, a silent acknowledgement of my new reality. "You know," he said, looking around my living room, now a maze of mattresses and toys, "you're doing an incredible job, Louisa." I just smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "It's a lot, but they're worth it." "They are," he agreed, "and you deserve all the help you can get." That conversation sparked an idea. I thought about the $78,452.16, the invoice that had started it all. I decided to write a blog post, a version of my original letter, but framed not as an invoice, but as a story. My story. The story of a woman who stepped up when no one else would, and the price she paid. I attached a link to a crowdfunding page. I wasn't asking for the $78,452.16. I was asking for help to give these kids the things Kent never would. A private tutor for Thea, who dreamed of going to a competitive high school. Ballet classes for Sella, whose talent was undeniable. The response was overwhelming. Strangers, friends, even distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years contributed. The story resonated. People understood the invisible labor, the emotional toll, the quiet sacrifices. The money started coming in, enough for Thea's tutor, enough for Sella's ballet shoes and lessons. My brother was horrified by the price I put on my loyalty. But what shocked him more was realizing that was me on discount.
The garage door never locked. Not when I was 14 and certainly not now. Back then, it was just a flimsy piece of aluminum separating me from the biting winter air, a thin cot with silverfish scuttling under it, and a pile of laundry that smelled faintly of mildew. My room, as George liked to call it, was really just a glorified storage unit. I ate most of my meals out there too, a plate balanced on an overturned bucket, listening to the muffled laughter from the main house. The main table, as Colton would sneer, was only for real family. Just a moment. Comment where you're watching from. It amazes me how far these reach. I remember Colton's 15th birthday clear as day. I was 14 a year younger and watched through the dusty garage window as a brand new cherry red Tesla pulled into the driveway. Colton, my stepbrother, shrieked, jumping up and down like a hyperactive puppy. George, my stepfather, clapped him on the back, beaming. Happy birthday, son. Only the best for my boy. Inside, Louisa, my mother, was already setting up a catered spread. I was supposed to be cleaning the garage, making sure my space was tidy. My own birthday a few months prior had been marked by a cracked Chromebook from a pawn shop. It's practical, Layla, Louisa had said, avoiding my gaze. You need it for school. George had a way of making me feel like an obligation, a stray cat he'd reluctantly taken in. The discount kid, he'd called me once, laughing with Sasha, his daughter from a previous marriage who was 17 then and already perfecting her elitist sneer. Louisa, my mother, just stood there, her lips pressed into a thin line, saying nothing. She always said nothing. Her silence was a constant companion, heavier than any words George could throw. I learned early on that crying was useless. It didn't change anything, didn't make the garage warmer, didn't make the silverfish disappear, and certainly didn't make me less of an outsider. Tears were just wasted effort. 12 years passed. A lot can change in 12 years. Now I'm 26. Colton is 27. Sasha is 29. Louisa is 48 and George is 52. And Colton? He's still parking his car in my driveway, except now it's a rusted, dented Camry, the kind that backfires when you turn the ignition. And it's not my mother and George's driveway, it's mine. He's been out there for an hour just sitting in his car, probably trying to work up the nerve. I watched him from my living room window, sipping my coffee, the morning sun streaming into my 3-story duplex. It's a beautiful place, a corner lot with a small manicured garden, one of 3 properties I own, actually. Finally, he gets out, shoves his hands in his pockets, and walks towards the door. My door. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. His expensive clothes from a few years ago now rumpled and stained. He knocks, a tentative, almost apologetic rap. I don't answer immediately. I let him stand there for a moment, let him feel the weight of the silence. Then I open the door, a small, polite smile on my face. Colton, I say, my voice even. What a surprise. He shifts his weight, eyes darting around the porch, avoiding mine. Layla, he stammers, his usual arrogance completely gone. Look, I know this is a lot to ask, but we need a place to stay. We need a place to stay, Colton repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at him, really looked at him. the once spoiled boy who'd gotten a Tesla at 15, while I was tucked away in a garage with a hand-me-down Chromebook. It wasn't just the car, though. It was the principle of it, the constant casual dismissal. They assumed I'd just fade away. They didn't see the unseen grind. While Colton was cruising around in his new ride, I was already plotting my escape. By the time I was 16, I was tutoring kids after school for $20 an hour, cash under the table. Weekends, I cleaned motel bathrooms. The owner, a gruff but fair man named Mr. Henderson, would pay me in cash and let me take home any discarded toiletries. I'd sort through them, find the unopened ones, and sell them in bulk online. It was tedious, sometimes disgusting work, but it was my money. No one could take it. No one could control it. That's also when I met Malachi. He was a year older than me, working at the same thrift store where I started buying clothes to refurbish and sell. He was quiet but brilliant. He taught me about shipping logistics, how to optimize listings, and the basics of SEO. We'd spend hours after our shifts, hunched over a laptop, turning $5 dresses into $50 sales. He became my first real ally, a quiet confidant who saw the fire in me that no one else bothered to notice. He's 27 now, and still just as quiet and brilliant. My mind drifted back to a particularly bitter memory, maybe a year before I started working at the motel, when I was 15. Sasha, then 17, had lost a cheap costume necklace, one of those gaudy things she wore for a week and then discarded. She'd somehow convinced George that I'd stolen it. I was in the kitchen washing dishes when George stormed in, his face red. "Where is it, Layla?" he'd roared, pointing a finger at me. "Sasha's necklace. You took it, didn't you, you little thief?" I just stared at him, my hands still in the soapy water. "I didn't take anything." Sasha stood behind him, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. "She's always so jealous, Dad. She probably wants to be like me." Louisa was there too, leaning against the counter, wringing her hands. "Layla, if you just tell us where it is." "I don't have it," I'd insisted, my voice tight. George had grabbed my arm, pulling me away from the sink. "You're grounded. No school trips, no friends, no phone for a month. And you're cleaning the entire house, top to bottom, until that necklace reappears." Louisa had just nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't defend me. She didn't even ask for proof. The necklace, of course, turned up a week later under Sasha's own bed. George never apologized. Louisa never brought it up. It was just another brick in the wall I was building around myself. I snapped back to the present, Colton still standing awkwardly on my porch. "A place to stay?" I repeated, my voice calm, almost amused. "Where are George and Mom?" As if on cue, a beat-up sedan, even rustier than Colton's Camry, pulled up to the curb. George emerged from the driver's side, looking haggard, his usually immaculate hair disheveled. Louisa was in the passenger seat, her face pale and drawn. They looked small, deflated. Louisa's eyes scanned the neighborhood, then landed on my duplex. Her jaw dropped. This wasn't the rundown apartment complex they probably expected. This was a quiet, tree-lined street, manicured lawns, and houses with actual curb appeal. She stumbled out of the car, her gaze sweeping over the freshly painted trim, the new windows, the small, tasteful porch swing. You live here?" she stammered, her voice thin with disbelief. George, ever the narcissist, tried to regain some composure, puffing out his chest, but his eyes betrayed his shock. He clearly hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected me to be anything more than that discount kid he'd left behind. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. It was a smile I'd perfected over years, one that promised nothing but delivered everything. I opened the door wider, stepping aside. "You're just in time for dinner," I said, my voice sweet, motioning with a subtle flick of my wrist. "Right this way, to the garage." The garage was exactly as I remembered it, only cleaner. I'd had it renovated, of course. New concrete floor, fresh paint, proper insulation, and a mini-split AC unit. It was still a garage, though, complete with a washer and dryer tucked into one corner, and the familiar scent of detergent. I watched them step inside, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Louisa's eyes, wide and bewildered, scanned the space. George's jaw tightened. Colton just looked around, bewildered, as if he expected a red carpet. "Dinner's in here," I said, gesturing to a small folding table I'd set up, covered with a cheap plastic tablecloth. On it sat 3 microwavable meals, the kind you find in the frozen food aisle. "Help yourselves." Their expressions were priceless. They were used to catered spreads, not TV dinners. Colton scoffed. "What is this, Layla? A joke?" "No joke," I replied, my voice calm. "Just dinner." It reminded me of another dinner 11 years ago when I was 15. George had called a family meeting. I remember sitting at the edge of the dining room table, the one I was rarely allowed to sit at, feeling like an intruder. George had a stack of papers. "Layla," he'd said, pushing a sheet across the polished wood. "These are the new house rules. Since you're living under my roof, you'll abide by them." I picked it up. It was typed, formal, almost like a legal document. "Rule 1, wake up at 6 a.m. sharp, no exceptions. Rule 2, no use of the microwave after 8 p.m. Rule 3, no staying up past 9 p.m. without express permission from George or Louisa. Rule 4, all meals to be eaten in the laundry area unless otherwise specified." There were more, equally petty and controlling. George had watched me, a smug look on his face. "Sign it. It's a contract." Louisa had just sat there, silent, staring at her plate. I'd signed it. What choice did I have? I was 15, nowhere to go. Now, standing in my garage, I pulled a stack of papers from a folder. "Before we go any further," I said, my voice crisp, "there are a few things we need to discuss. Terms of occupancy." I handed a thick packet to George, then 2 more to Louisa and Colton. George looked at the cover page. "Lease agreement?" he sputtered. "What is this nonsense?" "It's a lease agreement," I confirmed, "for the garage apartment. Standard terms, with a few specific clauses." Sasha, who had arrived a few minutes earlier in a taxi, her designer purse clutched tight, had been observing from the doorway. She was 29 now, looking a bit rough around the edges despite her expensive clothes. "A garage apartment?" she shrieked, her voice shrill. "You expect us to live in a garage?" "Layla, this is ridiculous. I just separated from my 3rd fiancé. I need a place to regroup, not a glorified shed." I ignored her, focusing on George. "You'll find the rules are quite clear. Revoked kitchen privileges in the main house, curfews and strict penalties for any mess or damage. Failure to comply results in termination of occupancy." Colton, who had been flipping through the pages, slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane! You can't just dictate our lives like this." "I need to speak to you, man to man." I raised an eyebrow. "There's nothing to discuss man to man, Colton. This is a legal document. You'll find the rent schedule on page 3 and the cleaning calendar on page 5. Rent is due on the 1st of every month. Failure to pay on time will incur late fees, as outlined in Clause 7B. Repeated late payments or any breach of the house rules will result in immediate eviction, no exceptions. No grace periods." George, his face turning a dangerous shade of red, finally found his voice. "This is outrageous. Louisa, call your lawyer. We'll have this thrown out. You can't treat family like this. Louisa looked up, her eyes darting between George and me. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I leaned against the door frame, a faint smile playing on my lips. George, I said, my voice soft, you're welcome to call any lawyer you like, but I should warn you, I'll be representing myself. I earned a minor in law during my business degree. I'm quite familiar with tenant-landlord rights. In this lease, it's ironclad. Colton's face went slack when I mentioned the law minor. Sasha, however, just scoffed. A minor? Please, Layla. You always did love to pretend you were smarter than everyone else. I ignored her. Their shock was exactly what I'd aimed for. They had expected me to be the same scared kid, easily manipulated. They hadn't bothered to track my trajectory, too busy with their own lives, their own self-importance. Colton especially had fallen far. I'd heard whispers, of course. Malachi, with his quiet network, kept an ear to the ground. Colton had gotten into crypto early, made a quick dizzying fortune in his early 20s. He'd bought a new Tesla, a penthouse, and convinced George to invest heavily too. But he was impulsive, arrogant. He'd gotten addicted to the rush, the fleeting windfall. He'd lost it all, and then some, chasing the next big coin. The street racing arrest was the final nail in the coffin, a reckless move that cost him his license, his insurance, and any hope of a legitimate job. He'd burn through his savings, then George's, and eventually Louisa's. Now he was just a shell of the entitled boy who'd once mocked my cracked Chromebook, jobless, broke, and bitter. It wasn't just Colton's downfall that had led them here. George had his own secrets. Years ago, after I'd left for college, I'd started receiving some of George's old mail forwarded to my new address by mistake. It was mostly junk, but one envelope caught my eye, a notice from a mortgage company. It was for a second mortgage on their house, taken out shortly after I'd turned 18. George had defaulted on it not long after I'd left. He must have used the equity for something and then couldn't keep up the payments. That house, the one I'd been kicked out of, the one where I'd lived in the garage, had been foreclosed on months ago. They'd been bouncing between relatives, then cheap motels, until they ran out of options. The next morning, the smell of burnt toast wafted from the garage. It was acrid, thick. I was in my kitchen making myself a proper breakfast, scrambled eggs, avocado, and strong coffee. I heard Louisa cough, then George curse. I walked to the door leading to the garage, pushing it open. Louisa stood by the small microwave, a smoking piece of bread clutched in a paper towel. The tiny garage apartment was filled with smoke. "Oh, Layla," she said, her voice strained. "I was just trying to make some toast. But the microwave, it's so small, and I think I set it too high." George was fanning the air with a magazine, looking utterly miserable. Sasha sat on her cot, scrolling on her phone, looking disgusted. "Don't worry," I said, my voice flat. "I already ate." I didn't offer to help. I didn't offer them anything. I remembered my first apartment, a tiny studio near campus. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine. I'd eaten ramen noodles for weeks, not because I was poor, but because I was proud. Proud that I'd earned every penny to be there, to be free. I'd vowed then and there that I would never need family again, not for a roof over my head, not for a meal, not for anything. That vow had fueled every late night, every extra shift, every calculated risk. Later that day, while doing a quick check of the garage apartment, a routine inspection, I told myself, I noticed a small, unmarked cardboard box tucked under Colton's cot. It looked like one of those random boxes of miscellaneous items people keep when they move. Curiosity, or perhaps something darker, made me pull it out. Inside, among old bills and expired coupons, was a thick cream-colored envelope. It was addressed to Louisa Powell. My name was clearly visible in the sender's address, Admissions Office, State University. My heart gave a strange, cold lurch. I knew what it was. My full-ride scholarship acceptance letter, the one I'd waited for, the one Louisa had assured me nothing came for. It was still sealed, unopened. I held it, the paper surprisingly heavy in my hand. The date on the postmark was from 8 years ago, the spring of my senior year. It had been sitting there, hidden for all this time. It was the proof I never knew I needed, the final piece of the puzzle that explained so much. I held the unopened envelope, my full-ride scholarship acceptance letter, for a long moment. 8 years. 8 years it had sat, hidden, while I had worked myself to the bone, convinced I was on my own. I remembered that spring, my senior year. I was 18. Every day I'd rush home from school, heart pounding, hoping to see an envelope from State University in the mailbox. Louisa would be there, usually watching TV or scrolling on her phone. "Anything for me, Mom?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual, but my voice always betrayed my desperation. She'd shrug, not even looking up. "No, honey, nothing came today. Maybe tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. Not for that letter, anyway. She'd always assured me nothing came, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. I'd eventually given up hope, convinced I hadn't been good enough, smart enough. It was a crushing blow, but it also solidified my resolve. If no one was going to open doors for me, I'd kick them down myself. I ended up applying to a local community college, working 2 jobs to pay for it, then transferring to a state university where I completed my business degree with that law minor, all on loans and grants I secured myself. Now, at dinner in the garage, the smell of burnt microwaved food still faintly lingered. George, Louisa, and Sasha were picking at their frozen meals. Colton was sulking, pushing his food around with a plastic fork. I walked in, the envelope held loosely in my hand, their heads snapped up. "Funny what surfaces," I said, my voice cutting through the silence, "when people are desperate." I tossed the envelope onto the table in front of Louisa. It landed with a soft thud. Louisa's eyes widened as she saw the university logo, then my name. Her face went ashen. George leaned over, squinting at it. Then his eyes narrowed and he shot Louisa a venomous look. "What is this?" Colton demanded, his voice sharp. "It's my acceptance letter," I stated, "from State University, full ride from 8 years ago." I looked directly at Louisa. "It never came? Did it, Mom?" Louisa flinched, her shoulders slumping. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were the same useless tears I remembered from my childhood. "Layla, George didn't want you to go." Her voice was a thin whisper. He said you were useful around the house, that we needed you. He said it would be too expensive, even with the scholarship, that there would be other costs, and we couldn't afford it." George scoffed. "Don't blame me, Louisa. You agreed." "He said you were useful," I repeated, ignoring George, my gaze fixed on Louisa. "Like a maid, a free laborer?" "No, Layla, it wasn't like that," she sobbed, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. He said we needed your help. He said we couldn't manage without you." She wrung her hands. "I was just trying to keep the peace. He was so angry about other things. I didn't want to upset him more." Her tears, her flimsy excuses, did nothing. They were just more of the same. More silence, more complicity, more putting George's comfort above my future. My face remained impassive. I see, I said, my voice devoid of warmth. So you chose him again. I pulled out my phone. Since we're all being so open and honest, I said, my fingers flying across the screen, I thought I'd share a little something with the world. I had pre-recorded a short video showing snippets of the lease agreement, the house rules from my childhood, and then the current slightly bewildered faces of George, Louisa, Colton, and Sasha as they navigated their new garage apartment. I added a voiceover, calm and measured, explaining the irony, the poetic justice. Old rules meet new karma, I captioned it and hit post. It was going straight to my business social media, where I had a surprisingly large following from my real estate ventures and my rags to riches personal brand. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with notifications. The video was already gaining traction, comments pouring in. People loved a good comeback story. As I watched the numbers climb, my phone buzzed again, this time with a private message request. A name I hadn't seen in years, Ariel Garcia, George's ex-wife, Sasha's mother. The message was short. Layla, I saw your video. I think we need to talk. About Colton. Ariel Garcia. The name brought a strange flicker of curiosity. I hadn't seen her since I was a small child, maybe 5 or 6, before George and Louisa got married. She was Sasha's mother, George's first wife. The message was intriguing, especially the part about Colton. I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe across town, far from my duplex. She was 45 now, still elegant, but with a weariness around her eyes that spoke of past battles. She ordered a black coffee, no sugar. Layla, she began, her voice low, I saw your video. It was powerful, and it reminded me of a lot of things you deserve to know. I just nodded, waiting. I had a feeling this wasn't going to be pleasant. Colton, she started, taking a sip of her coffee. He's not George's biological son. The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. I blinked. What? Louisa and George had a rough patch years ago before they married. They were on a break, seeing other people. Colton was conceived during that separation. George found out years later after they were married, after Colton was already a toddler. He never forgave Louisa. He kept it a secret for appearances, for his image, but he resented Colton for it. Deeply. It was a revelation that hit me with the force of a physical blow, yet also made a chilling kind of sense. So Colton isn't George's son, I murmured, processing it, but he's Louisa's, and George raised him as his own. Yes, Ariel confirmed, and Colton was always the golden child, the boy. George spoiled him rotten, probably trying to overcompensate, to prove to himself he was a good father, even to a child that wasn't his blood. But beneath it all, that resentment festered. And you, Layla, you were the easy target? The extra daughter, I said, a bitter taste in my mouth. The one who wasn't his blood and wasn't even the son he felt obligated to raise. Ariel nodded slowly. Exactly. He projected all his bitterness onto you. You were the convenient scapegoat, the one he could belittle and neglect without consequence. It made his treatment of you even more cruel, knowing he was already carrying that secret about Colton. She leaned forward, her voice dropping even lower. And there's something else. When George and I divorced, there was a trust fund set up for Sasha for her college. George had told me he was setting up a similar fund for Colton, and even mentioned he was putting aside money for Layla's share when he married Louisa. He specifically said it was for future educational expenses. But when Colton turned 15 and that Tesla appeared, that wasn't from a trust fund. That was from the money George had supposedly set aside for Colton's college and what he claimed was Layla's share. He drained it all for that car. He never intended for you to go to college, Layla. He wanted you to stay, to be useful. The pieces clicked into place. The unopened acceptance letter, Louisa's pathetic excuses, George's casual cruelty. It wasn't just neglect, it was calculated. They wanted me trapped. I thanked Ariel, my mind reeling. The truth, as they say, smells like gasoline. It was explosive. When I got back to the duplex, the garage door was slightly ajar. A faint clanging sound came from inside. My landlord instincts, honed over years, screamed. I pushed the door open quietly. Colton was standing by the small kitchenette area I'd installed, wrestling with the mini fridge. He had a wrench in his hand, trying to detach the water line. The microwave was already unplugged and sitting on the floor, ready to be moved. "What are you doing, Colton?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. He froze, dropping the wrench with a clatter. His eyes, wide with panic, darted to me. "Layla, I was just checking the connections. It wasn't working right." "Don't lie to me," I said, stepping fully into the garage. "You're trying to steal my appliances to pawn them, aren't you?" His shoulders slumped. He didn't deny it. Desperation had stripped him bare. "Get out," I said, my voice cold and unwavering. "Get your things. You have 30 minutes. Colton, you're evicted, effective immediately." Sasha, who had been asleep on her cot, sat up, rubbing her eyes. "What's going on?" she mumbled, then saw Colton's expression and the unplugged fridge. "Colton, you idiot!" George and Louisa appeared from the back of the garage, drawn by the commotion. "Evicted?" George roared. "You can't do that. Where will he go?" "That's no longer my concern," I stated, my gaze fixed on Colton. 30 minutes. And Sasha, I added, turning to her, "You're welcome to stay, but I'm amending your lease. No more guests, no more drama, and you'll be paying Colton's share of the rent, effective today. Or you can leave with him." Sasha stared at me, then at Colton, then at her phone. Her third fiancé was gone. She had nowhere else. She grabbed her purse. "Forget it, Layla. I'm not staying in this dump with you lording over me. I'm out." She stormed past me, out the door. Colton, defeated, started stuffing his meager belongings into a duffel bag. George rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "Layla, please, she's got nowhere else. Colton's got nowhere else. You can't just throw them out into the street." I looked at his pleading face, the man who had once called me a discount kid, who had stolen my future. My expression remained blank. I pulled my arm free. "Watch me." I stepped back, letting Colton finish gathering his things. As he walked out, head bowed, George still pleading behind him, I simply reached out and pulled the garage door shut. The heavy metal scraped against the concrete, then clicked into place. Locked. The formal dining room gleamed under the soft light of the chandelier. I ran a hand over the polished mahogany table, tracing the intricate carvings. This was the same kind of table George and Louisa had, the main table I was never allowed to sit at for family meals. Now it was my table, set with my good china, crystal glasses, and heavy silver cutlery. Tonight I was hosting a dinner for potential investors, a crucial step in acquiring my fourth property. I remembered standing in the doorway of their dining room, a silent observer, a ghost in my own home. I'd watch them laugh, share stories, pass dishes around, while I ate alone in the laundry area, the clatter of their forks on china, a distant mocking soundtrack. George would occasionally glance at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes, as if my very presence was an inconvenience. Louisa would avoid my gaze, her silence a shield. I was the unwanted obligation, the discount kid who didn't belong. But this house, my house, was different. Every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, Every dish in the cabinet. I had earned it. I had bought it. I owned it. And tonight I was not a ghost. I was the owner, the host, the one in control. I placed a heavy framed document on a small side table in the corner of the dining room, visible to anyone who cared to look. It was a copy of the lease agreement I had given them, the one with all the specific clauses and rules, a quiet reminder of who held the power now. Just as George had made me sign his house rules at 15, I had made them sign mine. From the kitchen, I could hear muffled sounds from the garage. George and Louisa were still there, the only remaining occupants. Sasha had left with Colton, opting for the uncertainty of the streets over my lording over her. I hadn't seen or heard from either of them since. George had tried to call me, text me, even bang on my front door, but I'd ignored him. The garage door was now locked from the inside, of course. They could only exit through the side door, which led to the alley. I'd instructed Malachi, my property manager, to install a new, more secure lock on the garage door the day after Colton's eviction. And the thermostat for the garage apartment? It was locked to a cool 62 degrees Fahrenheit, not freezing, but certainly not comfortable, just a constant subtle reminder of their diminished circumstances, a whisper of the cold garage I'd once called home. My investors arrived promptly at 7. They were a mix of seasoned professionals and ambitious newcomers, all keen on my track record. The conversation flowed easily. Market trends, investment strategies, my plans for expansion. I was articulate, confident, and utterly in my element. I watched their faces, seeing respect and admiration, not pity or dismissal. This was the Lila I had built, brick by painful brick. As we ate, the clinking of my good dishes filled the dining room. I imagined George and Louisa in the garage, perhaps microwaving another sad meal, listening to the sounds of my success. The irony was a rich, satisfying taste, far better than any gourmet food. They were the ones eating leftovers now, confined to the periphery, while I commanded the main table. The dinner was a resounding success. Deals were discussed, handshakes exchanged, and promises made. After my guests left, the house felt quiet, but not empty. It felt full, filled with my own accomplishments. I walked through the house, turning off lights, checking locks. When I passed the garage door, I noticed a small piece of paper tucked under the crack. It was folded neatly. I picked it up. It was Louisa's handwriting, shaky and small. Layla. Was I really that bad? I read it once, then again. My mother, reduced to a desperate plea, scrawled on a scrap of paper. The question hung in the air, pathetic and accusatory. I walked into the living room, where a small fire crackled merrily in the fireplace. Without a moment's hesitation, I crumpled the note in my hand. It was just another useless tear, another empty excuse. I tossed it into the flames. It caught quickly, curling into ash, disappearing without a trace. The fire continued to burn, warm and bright, illuminating the room I had built for myself. The final eviction notices were crisp, official, and utterly satisfying. I held them in my hand, the legal weight of them a stark contrast to the flimsy house rules George had once made me sign. The grace period for their tenancy in the garage apartment had lapsed. All the clauses they'd breached, all the warnings they'd ignored, it had all led to this. I walked to the side door of the garage, the one that led to the alley. It was a cold morning, the kind that bites at your exposed skin, much like the mornings I remembered from my childhood in that very garage. I knocked firmly. Louisa opened the door. She looked even smaller than before, her shoulders hunched. She was wearing a faded, oversized coat, one that looked eerily familiar. It was the same worn-out, hand-me-down coat I used to wear at 14, the one she'd given me because her new husband, George, said I didn't need a new one. George was behind her, his face a mask of defeat. His usual bluster was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed resignation. I held out the envelopes. "These are your final notices," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "You have until noon to vacate the premises." Louisa's eyes welled up, but no tears fell. She just stared at the papers, then at me. "Layla," she whispered, her voice barely audible, we thought we had more time." I met her gaze, unflinching. "So did I replied, the words measured, deliberate. "At 14. Her face crumpled, but I didn't flinch. George just stood there, speechless for once. They had nothing left to say, nothing left to threaten me with. They were just two broken people facing the consequences of a lifetime of choices. I watched them pack their few belongings into a couple of battered suitcases. Colton and Sasha hadn't returned, their pride apparently outweighing their desperation. George and Louisa were truly alone now, just as I had been for so many years. At noon, they shuffled out, their heads bowed, and disappeared down the alley. I closed the door, the click of the lock echoing in the quiet space. The house felt different now. Not empty, but cleansed. I walked through my main home, the one connected to the garage, the one I had built from the ground up. I paused by the thermostat in the living room, the one that controlled the temperature throughout the house, including the garage. I remembered the constant chill of my childhood room, the deliberate control George had exerted over my comfort. Now the thermostat was mine. I could set it to whatever I wanted. I left it at a comfortable 70 degrees. I walked into the kitchen, running my hand over the smooth granite countertop of my island. This was my kitchen table, not the main table I was excluded from. Here I ate when I wanted, what I wanted, with whomever I chose. It was a quiet victory, a daily affirmation of my freedom. Finally, I walked into my bedroom, a sanctuary of peace and quiet. The bed was made, the room tidy, a stark contrast to the cramped cot and laundry piles of my past. I sat down at my desk, pulling open a shipment box that had arrived earlier. Inside were stacks of new tenant contracts, crisp and ready. Malachi had already lined up new occupants for the garage apartment, a young couple just starting out, eager for an affordable place. They would pay their rent on time. They would respect the rules. As I opened the first contract, a faint smile touched my lips. "That's the thing about karma," I murmured to the empty room. "It never misses." I was alone in my house, but the loneliness that had once been my constant companion was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet strength, a profound sense of accomplishment. I was victorious, I was empowered, and I was finally free.
They gave me a choice, my son or them. It wasn't a choice at all. My name is Zoe Rodriguez. I'm 26 years old now, and for the past 3 years, I've been a ghost to my own family. Not a quiet, fading ghost, but the kind that haunts their perfect, manicured lives from the shadows. The kind they pretend doesn't exist. Before I continue, comment your country or city. I love seeing where my stories land. It all started 3 years ago when I was 23. I was young, yes, but I was ready. Ready for Hayden, my son. He came into the world tiny and perfect, and holding him for the first time, I knew my life had just truly begun. My parents, Ramona and Wallace Rodriguez, saw it differently. To them, my pregnancy was an embarrassment, a stain on their carefully constructed image. An unmarried daughter, pregnant, unthinkable. They didn't even try to hide their disgust. Ramona, my mother, a woman whose smile could freeze water, called me into her study a week after Hayden was born. She was 55 then, perfectly coiffed, every strand of her dark hair in place, just like her life. My father, Wallace, 57, sat silently beside her, his presence a heavy, enabling weight. Zoe, Ramona began, her voice dripping with a false concern that made my skin crawl. We've been talking. This situation is not ideal for anyone, especially not for the baby. I clutched Hayden tighter, his tiny head nestled against my chest. What are you talking about, Mom? You're unstable, Wallace finally spoke, his eyes fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. Emotionally. You're not fit to raise a child right now. You need time to get yourself together. Unstable? I was exhausted, yes, but I was clear-headed. My entire focus was on Hayden, but they had already decided. They had a solution, of course. Their perfect solution. Aaliyah and Charles are willing to take him, Ramona continued, as if discussing a stray puppy. They're married, stable. Charles is 30. Aaliyah is 26. They have a beautiful home. They can provide for him properly. He'll have a good life. You can visit when you're better. My older sister, Aaliyah, 29 now, was their golden child. 3 years my senior, she'd followed their blueprint perfectly. Prestigious university, a respectable husband in Charles Cooper, a life of quiet affluence. And now they wanted her to raise my son, my newborn son, as if he were a package to be transferred. I stared at them, the blood draining from my face. You want me to give up my baby? To Aaliyah? Ramona sighed, a dramatic put-upon sound. It's for the best, dear. We've already drawn up the papers. It's a temporary transfer of custody, just until you're on your feet. No. The word was a whisper at first, then it grew, fueled by a primal fire I didn't know I possessed. No. He is my son. I'm not signing anything. The air in the room went cold. Wallace's jaw tightened. Ramona's lips thinned into a razor-thin line. Zoe, don't be foolish. We will not support this. You will have nothing. Then I'll have nothing, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Except him. I walked out of that house with Hayden in my arms, a small duffel bag slung over my shoulder, and not a single cent to my name. They cut me off completely. No money, no access to my old bank accounts, no home. Just like that, I was erased. The next few months were a blur of desperation and sheer will. I slept on friends' couches, bless Freya Hicks, my co-worker from the diner, for letting me crash on her sofa for weeks. I waitressed nights, my feet aching, my eyes heavy, while Hayden slept in a bassinet in the break room, or with a trusted friend. Every dollar I earned went to formula, diapers, and a roof over our heads. Eventually, a tiny one-bedroom apartment that felt like a palace compared to the street. I learned to stretch every penny, to find joy in the smallest things, like Hayden's first smile, his first laugh. He was my reason, my anchor, my entire world, and I was his. 3 years passed. I turned 26. Hayden turned 3. We built a life, brick by painful brick. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. It was honest, and I was stable. More stable than I'd ever been under my family's suffocating thumb. I had my own place, a steady job, and a son who adored me. The memory of their betrayal still stung, a dull ache beneath the surface, but I'd learned to live with it. I'd learned to be content with my quiet, independent life. Until last night. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from Curtis Gray, my best friend from high school. He's 27 now, a caseworker at Child Protective Services. We'd stayed close, even after I was cut off, a quiet rebellion against my family's decree. The message was short, cryptic, and instantly sent a chill down my spine. You'll want to see this. It's about Aaliyah. The text from Curtis felt like a punch to the gut. You'll want to see this. It's about Aaliyah. My stomach clenched. For 3 years, I'd tried to build a wall around myself, a fortress of quiet independence to keep their drama out. But the name Aaliyah always found a way to chip at the mortar. I called Curtis immediately. He picked up on the second ring, his voice low. Zoe, can you meet me for coffee tomorrow, my lunch break? It's sensitive. Sensitive about Aaliyah usually means a disaster for me, I said, trying to keep my voice light, but the tremor was there. This time, he replied, it might be a disaster for her. The next day, I dropped Hayden off at his preschool, a small community-run place that felt like a second home, and practically ran to the coffee shop. Curtis was already there, nursing a black coffee. He's always been the calm one, even in high school. Today, though, his brow was furrowed. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. It was heavy, and my fingers trembled as I touched it. "I shouldn't even be showing you this, but you deserve to know." "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "A CPS report," he said, his gaze serious. "On Aaliyah and Charles." It came in anonymously, but it's serious enough that we're moving forward. I opened the folder. The first page was a summary, heavily redacted, but enough words peeked through to make my blood run cold. Allegations of neglect, frequent injuries, withdrawn behaviour. My eyes scanned further down. Child, Caden Cooper, age 3. Caden, 3 years old. My breath hitched. Aaliyah has a son. The words were out before I could stop them. My voice was sharp, disbelieving. Curtis nodded slowly. "Yeah, Caden. He's 3. Born just a few months after Hayden, actually. I thought you knew." My vision blurred. 3 years. 3 years they had kept this from me. My family, the same people who had tried to take my newborn son, claiming I was unfit, had another child in their midst, and they hadn't even bothered to tell me he existed. Not a phone call, not a text, not even a whisper through the family grapevine that I was so thoroughly cut off from. It was a fresh betrayal, a new layer of ice on an old wound. While I was struggling, building a life from nothing, they were parading around with another grandchild, another perfect addition to their perfect family, pretending I didn't exist, pretending my son didn't exist. And now, this. "Why didn't I know?" I whispered, the cold fury starting to bubble. "Why did no one tell me?" Curtis just shook his head. "I don't know, Zoe. It's not my place to say. But the report, it's concerning. Multiple calls over the last few months. The anonymous source seems to have a lot of specific details." I flipped through the pages. Redacted names, dates, but the descriptions were vivid. A bruise on the arm, a cut on the forehead, unexplained falls. Caden, described as quiet, often looking sad. My heart ached for this child I didn't even know. "The source is anonymous," I repeated, my mind racing. "Could it be fake?" Curtis sighed. "It's possible. But the details align with some of our observations from a preliminary visit, and the school's feedback on Caden's behaviour is consistent with the allegations." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Look, Zoe, I know this is personal for you, your family. They did a number on you, but you cannot get emotionally involved in this. Not officially. It'll only complicate things. You're a relative, and it could be seen as you having an agenda." "An agenda?" I scoffed, the anger finally breaking through. "They tried to steal my baby, Curtis. They called me unstable, unfit, while they were parading around with a secret grandchild who might be getting hurt. You think I don't have an agenda? My agenda is truth. My agenda is making sure no child goes through what Hayden and I went through, or worse." He held up his hands, placating. "I get it. Believe me, I do. But you need to be smart about this. Let CPS do its job. We're taking it seriously." I closed the folder, the weight of it pressing down on me. The allegations, the hidden child, the sheer hypocrisy of it all. It was too much. But beneath the shock and the hurt, a different feeling began to stir. A cold, hard resolve. They had tried to break me. They had tried to erase me. And now, karma, it seemed, was knocking on their perfectly polished front door. "What happens next?" I asked, my voice steady, the tremor gone. Curtis picked up his coffee. "The court has scheduled a hearing. It's to unseal the full file, get a judge's order for a more in-depth investigation. It's moving fast, next Tuesday." He paused, looking directly at me. "Aaliyah and Charles will be there. They don't know you're aware of any of this. And they certainly won't know you might be there too." The news about Caden hit me harder than I expected. Not just the betrayal of them keeping him a secret, but the raw, visceral fear for a child I'd never met. My own son, Hayden, was my world. The thought of any child, especially one so closely related to me, being neglected or hurt was unbearable. After my meeting with Curtis, a cold, calculated fury settled over me. He'd warned me not to get emotionally involved, but that was a joke. This was emotional. This was about everything they'd done to me, amplified by the potential harm to an innocent child. The hypocrisy of it all was a bitter taste in my mouth. They deemed me unfit, a single mother then, at 23, struggling but fiercely loving. Meanwhile, their golden child, Alea, living the perfect life they'd orchestrated, was facing CPS allegations. I couldn't just sit back and wait for next Tuesday's hearing. I needed to know more. I needed proof, not just for the court, but for myself. To validate the quiet rage that had simmered for 3 years, my first stop was social media. My family, especially Alia, lived their lives online, a curated highlight reel of perfection. I hadn't looked at her profiles in years, the pain too fresh, but now, armed with a new purpose, I found her public Instagram. It was exactly as I remembered. Glossy photos of family vacations, expensive dinners, and now pictures of Caden. He was a beautiful boy, with Alea's dark hair and Charles's serious eyes. In most photos, he was smiling, often posed with Alea or Charles, looking like the picture of a happy, well-adjusted child. A perfect family for the cameras. But then I started looking closer, really looking. In one photo taken at a park, Caden was on a swing, his smile wide, but his eyes seemed distant. In another, at a birthday party, he was clutching Charles's hand, his small body pressed against his father's leg, almost hiding. And in a few, I noticed subtle things. A long-sleeved shirt on a warm day, a hat pulled low, my gut twisted. Was I imagining things, or was there a flicker of something, a shadow in his eyes that the perfect lighting couldn't hide? I decided to do some digging. I still had a few old contacts from my pre-exile life. I discreetly reached out to a former neighbour who lived a few houses down from Alea and Charles. I claimed I was just checking in, reminiscing about the old neighbourhood. It took a few calls, but eventually, the woman, Mrs. Henderson, a notorious gossip, let slip a few things. "Oh, Alea and Charles," she'd said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Lovely couple, of course, but you know, I've seen police cars there a few times. Nothing major, just domestic disturbances, I think they called them, always late at night. And their little boy, Caden, he's a quiet one, never really plays outside much. Police cars, domestic disturbances. My heart pounded. This wasn't just anonymous tips. This was real. I started a new folder on my laptop, not for work, but for Caden. I screenshot every suspicious photo, noted dates, times. I wrote down Mrs. Henderson's comments, the dates she mentioned seeing police cars. I was building a case, not just for CPS, but for the truth. I confided in Freya, my co-worker, and now closest friend. She was 26, just like me, and had been my rock through the darkest days. We were on a break at the diner, wiping down tables. "This is insane, Freya," I told her, showing her some of the photos and my notes. They tried to say I was unstable. And now this. It's too much. Freya, always practical, always supportive, looked at me, her eyes serious. "Zoe, this is huge. And you're right, it's beyond messed up. But you need to be smart about this. Don't just feel it, document it. Every single thing, every photo, every date, every detail. Get a timeline going." "Why?" I asked, feeling a surge of determination. "Because," she said, leaning in, "no one believes the quiet mum who got cut off. They'll just say you're bitter, you're jealous, but documented truth? That speaks. That's undeniable." Her words resonated deeply. She was right. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about Caden, and it was about finally, definitively, exposing the rot beneath my family's perfect facade. I would fight not to win custody, but to win the truth. To show the world and them who the truly unstable ones were. The hearing was scheduled for next Tuesday. I kept going through Alea's social media, cross-referencing dates with the redacted CPS report Curtis had shown me. The report mentioned an injury on August 14th, a significant bruise. I scrolled through Alea's photos from that week, and then I found it. A photo posted on August 15th, a family outing to an outdoor festival. Alea, Charles and Caden, all smiling, and Caden was wearing a thick knitted scarf in August. The Tuesday of the hearing dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I'd spent the weekend documenting everything, cross-referencing dates, and rereading the redacted CPS report until the words blurred. Freya had offered to watch Hayden, but I'd politely declined. I wanted him with me. Not in the courtroom itself, but nearby. He was my anchor, my reason for everything. He was the living, breathing proof of the life they tried to erase. I dressed carefully that morning, not in anything flashy, but in a simple, dark dress that felt professional and understated. I wanted to project calm, competence, not the unstable girl they'd tried to paint me as. Hayden, oblivious to the gravity of the day, was excited for a trip downtown. We took the bus, his small hand warm in mine. The courthouse was a grand, imposing building, bustling with people. Lawyers in suits, families looking anxious, the low hum of conversations. I found a quiet bench in the main waiting area, just outside the family courtrooms. Hayden sat beside me, drawing in a small notebook I'd packed for him. I kept my eyes on the entrance, my heart thrumming a nervous rhythm against my ribs. Then I saw them, Alea and Charles. They walked in quickly, their usual confident stride replaced by a hurried, almost frantic pace. Alea, 29, usually so composed, looked dishevelled. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was a mess, and her eyes were red-rimmed. She was clutching Charles's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. Charles, 33, looked pale and tense, his jaw clenched. He kept glancing around nervously, as if expecting someone. They didn't see me. Not yet. They huddled in a corner, Alea whispering frantically to Charles, who just nodded, his gaze fixed on the ground. This wasn't the picture-perfect couple from the Instagram feed. This was raw, exposed fear. It was almost satisfying to watch. Almost. A few minutes later, my parents arrived. Ramona, 58, swept in, her usual aura of impeccable control slightly frayed around the edges. She was still dressed immaculately, but her movements were sharper, her eyes darting. Wallace, 60, walked beside her, his face a mask of stern disapproval. They went straight to Alea and Charles, Ramona immediately taking charge, her voice a low, urgent murmur. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the tension in their small group was palpable. They looked like a huddle of conspirators, trying to shore up a crumbling wall. I watched them. A strange mix of detachment and intense focus. They were so consumed by their own panic, their own image, that they didn't notice me, sitting quietly just 20 feet away, my son drawing peacefully beside me. Then a woman in a crisp suit walked in, carrying a large file. Michelle Peters, the head CPS investigator Curtis had mentioned. She was about 50, with an air of quiet authority. She moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the waiting area. Her gaze swept over my family's huddle, lingered for a moment, then moved on. She didn't see me either. Not yet. A court officer called out, "Case 23, CV, EU712, Cooper." My family stiffened. Alia let out a small, choked sob. Ramona patted her arm, a gesture of control, not comfort. They stood up, a united front of wealth and anxiety, and began to walk towards the courtroom door. I took a deep breath. "Hayden, sweetie, stay right here, okay? Mummy just needs to go inside for a minute." He looked up, his bright, innocent eyes meeting mine. "Okay, Mummy." I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked towards the courtroom. My steps were slow, deliberate. I could feel their eyes on me as I approached the door. Alea, Charles, Ramona, Wallace. They were all just about to enter. I pushed the door open, the creak of the hinges echoing slightly in the quiet hallway. I stepped into the hearing room, my gaze sweeping over the small group of people already seated. The judge, a court clerk, Michelle Peters, already at a table, and then their eyes found me. Alea's head snapped up first. Her eyes widened, her jaw going slack. Charles froze, his hand still on Alea's back. Ramona's perfectly composed face went utterly blank, a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Wallace, who had been about to step inside, stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes fixed on me, disbelief warring with a dawning dread. The air in the room seemed to thicken. For a moment, no one moved. Their faces, usually so carefully controlled, were stripped bare. Shock, betrayal, and above all, a chilling, profound horror that the ghost they'd tried to bury had just walked into their carefully constructed nightmare. Michelle Peters, who had been arranging papers on her table, looked up at the sudden silence. Her eyes met mine, then flickered to my family's stunned faces. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her features. Curiosity, perhaps? Or a dawning suspicion that there was far more to this model family than met the eye. The judge cleared his throat. "Are we ready to proceed?" The file, thick with allegations, lay open on Michelle's table. Photos, therapist reports, school feedback. It was all there. And I knew, from Curtis, that among the details there was the chilling suspicion that Caden may have been injured while in Charles's sole care. And worse, a growing concern about emotional abuse from Alea. The silence in the courtroom after my entrance was deafening, broken only by the judge clearing his throat. My family's faces were still frozen in that tableau of horror. Michelle Peters, the CPS investigator, recovered first, her professional demeanour instantly back in place. She gave my family a pointed look, then turned to the judge. "Your Honour, we are ready to proceed with the motion to unseal the file regarding Caden Cooper." The judge nodded, his gaze briefly sweeping over my family, then landing on me. There was no recognition, just a fleeting curiosity before he focused on Michelle. I moved to an empty seat in the back row, a quiet observer. The hearing began. Michelle Peters laid out the initial findings, reading from the redacted report. Allegations of neglect, unexplained injuries, Caden's withdrawn behaviour at preschool. She spoke in a calm, factual tone, but the words hit like blows. My parents and Alea and Charles sat at the front table, their lawyer, a slick-haired man I didn't recognise, whispering urgently to them. Ramona, ever the strategist, tried to control the narrative from her seat, even without speaking. She kept shooting Charles accusatory glances, her body language subtly shifting blame. She leaned over to him, her voice a sharp whisper. "Charles, what is this? You were supposed to be watching him that day." Charles flinched, his face paling further. It was clear she was trying to pin everything on him, the passive husband, the outsider. During a short recess, as people shuffled out, Ramona made a beeline for me. Her eyes were narrowed, but her voice, when she spoke, was laced with a chillingly false concern. "Zoe, what are you doing here? You know this isn't your place. This is a family matter. A private one." "It stopped being private when you tried to take my son," I said, my voice low, steady. "And it stopped being a family matter when you cut me off. I'm here because a child might be in danger. A child you kept secret from me." Her jaw tightened. "Don't be ridiculous. This is a misunderstanding. And you showing up here, making a scene, it doesn't help anyone, especially not Alia. She's distraught." She glanced around as if worried someone might overhear. "This could ruin us, Zoe. Our reputation." "Your reputation?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "You cared about reputation when you tried to claim I was unstable. You didn't care about reputation when you kept a secret grandchild from me." "Funny how that works." Ramona opened her mouth to argue, but Alia, looking even more frantic than before, stumbled towards us. Charles was a few steps behind her, his face a mask of misery. Alea's eyes, red and puffy, met mine. She looked utterly broken. "Zoe," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please, don't do this." I looked at her, my sister, the one who had been ready to take my baby, the one who had lived the perfect life. "Don't do what, Alea? Don't show up? Don't acknowledge the truth?" She burst into tears, a raw, ugly sound. "It's not what you think. Charles, he's been so distant, so angry. He's been..." Cruel. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. He drinks. He gets so angry. And he yells at Caden. He's not the man everyone thinks he is. A flicker of something akin to sympathy stirred in my chest. A crack in the perfect facade. A glimpse of the real Alea, trapped in a life that wasn't as idyllic as it seemed. She was 29, married, supposedly stable, and yet she was crying in a courthouse hallway, admitting her husband was abusive. But then her eyes hardened, and the sympathy vanished as quickly as it came. You got out, Zoe. You ran away and built your little life. Don't act like you're better than me. Don't you dare. The words were spat, laced with a venom that reminded me of the old Alea, the one who always resented my independence, even when she claimed to pity me. The hint of sympathy I felt shriveled and died. Better than her? I never claimed to be. But I had chosen a different path. I had been doubted, dismissed, deemed unfit to raise my own son. They had tried to erase me, to make me sign away the most precious thing in my life. And through all the struggle, the sleepless nights, the financial strain, I had never, not once, harmed Hayden. I had never let him feel anything but love and security. I had never hidden him, never let him be hurt. I had been the unstable one, yet I had protected my child with every fibre of my being. The court officer called everyone back in. As we re-entered, Michelle Peters cleared her throat, holding up a new document. Your Honour, she stated, her voice clear and firm. We have just received a new piece of evidence, a signed affidavit from a former nanny who was employed by Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez Cooper approximately 2 years ago. The affidavit alleges that Mrs. Ramona Rodriguez was aware of injuries sustained by Caden Cooper on multiple occasions and actively worked to conceal them, advising the nanny to keep silent and threatening her employment if she spoke out. My parents' faces, which had begun to regain some composure, went white. Ramona's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen on her before. The perfect orchestrator, caught in her own web. The nanny's affidavit dropped like a bomb in the quiet courtroom. Ramona's face was a mask of pure shock, a rare crack in her carefully constructed facade. Wallace, usually so silent and enabling, finally spoke, his voice booming with a defensive denial. This is outrageous! A lie! My wife would never... The judge cut him off sharply. Mr. Rodriguez, you will have your opportunity to speak through your counsel. For now, please maintain order. Michelle Peters continued, her voice unwavering as she detailed the allegations from the affidavit. It painted a picture of a family desperate to maintain appearances, even at the cost of a child's well-being. Ramona, the orchestrator, had not only known about Caden's injuries, but had actively suppressed the truth. It wasn't just Alea and Charles anymore. The rot went deeper, right to the core of the family that had once cast me out for daring to be imperfect. The hearing, which had started as a motion to unseal a file, quickly spiralled into a full-blown exposé of years of dysfunction. The judge ordered immediate emergency evaluators to assess Caden's living situation. Custody of Caden was suspended pending a full investigation. He would be placed in temporary protective care, likely a foster home, while CPS determined the best long-term solution. Alea broke down completely, sobbing uncontrollably. Charles sat rigid, staring straight ahead, his face a mixture of fear and simmering resentment. Ramona, however, was already back in damage control mode, her eyes darting between the judge, Michelle, and her family. She looked like a cornered animal, desperate to regain control. During another recess, as the lawyers huddled, Ramona approached me again, this time with a desperate plea that was almost comical in its audacity. Her voice was low, urgent, stripped of its usual icy disdain. Zoe, you have to do something. This is a nightmare. Our name, the family name, will be ruined. Think of Wallace. Think of Alea. You have to protect us. Like a sister should, like she didn't. The sheer hypocrisy took my breath away. Protect us. The same people who had tried to erase me, who had thrown me out with a newborn, were now begging for my help. And the jab about Aaliyah, a subtle attempt to shift blame and guilt me into action, was classic Ramona. I looked her dead in the eye, a calm I hadn't known I possessed settling over me. Protect you? You cut me off, Mum. You called me unstable. You tried to take my son. You chose your image over me, over Hayden. Why would I protect you now? Her face crumpled, a flicker of genuine fear passing through her eyes. Because we're family. This is tearing us apart. If this gets out, everything we've built. Everything you built was a lie, I said, my voice quiet but firm. A lie you forced me to live under. I'm not part of that anymore. I'm free. And in that moment, I truly felt it. Free. Free from their expectations, their judgment, their suffocating control. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms, with my own strength. I had nothing to lose by speaking the truth, and everything to gain, not just for Caden, but for myself. The power I felt wasn't from vengeance, but from standing firm in my own truth, unburdened by their approval. Michelle Peters, who had been observing our exchange from a distance, walked over. She looked at Ramona with a professional yet pointed expression, then turned to me. Ms. Rodriguez, the judge would like to hear from you, briefly. Ramona's eyes widened, a silent plea for me to refuse, but I just nodded, a small, resolute smile touching my lips. Of course, I said to Michelle. As I walked towards the witness stand, I felt a connection with Michelle Peters that transcended our roles. Her gaze was no longer just curious, it was understanding, almost sympathetic. She had seen through the model family illusion, and in me she saw not the unstable daughter, but a competent, capable woman who had fought for her child and was now fighting for another. It was a validation I hadn't realised I craved, but it settled deep in my bones. I took the stand, the weight of 3 years of silence pressing down, then lifting. I looked at the judge, then briefly at my family, their faces a mixture of dread and disbelief. Your Honour, I began, my voice clear and steady, 3 years ago, this family, my parents, Ramona and Wallace Rodriguez, and my sister, Alea Rodriguez Cooper, tried to take my newborn son, Hayden, from me. They claimed I was emotionally unstable, unfit to be a mother. They pressured me to sign over custody to Alea, who they said had a stable home, a perfect life. When I refused, they cut me off completely. I left with nothing but my baby. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The judge's expression was unreadable, but Michelle Peters was watching me intently. My family looked like they'd been slapped. I rebuilt my life, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Alone, with my son. I never harmed him. I never neglected him. I never hid him. And now, 3 years later, I stand here, a stable, independent mother, while the family who tried to erase me is facing allegations of child neglect and cover-ups. I looked directly at Ramona and Wallace, then at Alia and Charles. 3 years ago, they said I was unfit. They tried to erase me. I never forgot. And clearly, neither did karma. My testimony hung in the air, a raw, undeniable truth that sliced through the carefully constructed silence of the courtroom. The judge, a stoic man who had presided over countless family dramas, looked at me for a long moment, then at my family, then back to the thick file on his desk. He cleared his throat. Given the compelling testimony, the detailed CPS report, and the affidavit from the former nanny, the court finds sufficient grounds to proceed with immediate protective measures for Caden Cooper. A collective gasp went through the front table. Alea let out a strangled cry. Ramona's face, already pale, seemed to drain of all colour. The judge continued, his voice firm. Effective immediately, temporary protective oversight for Caden Cooper is granted to Child Protective Services. Custody will be suspended from Mr. Charles Cooper and Mrs. Alea Rodriguez Cooper, pending a full, in-depth investigation into the allegations of neglect and abuse. Caden Cooper will be placed in a temporary foster home, determined by CPS, until a more permanent solution can be established. Alea buried her face in Charles's shoulder, her sobs echoing in the quiet room. Charles sat rigidly, his eyes fixed on the judge, a vein throbbing in his temple. Ramona looked like she'd been struck, her gaze darting frantically between the judge and Michelle Peters. Wallace, for once, was utterly silent, his imposing figure seeming to shrink in his seat. Furthermore, the judge added, his gaze sweeping over Ramona and Wallace, due to the serious nature of the allegations regarding the suppression of evidence and the alleged cover-up of child injuries, the court is ordering wider investigations into the actions of Ramona Rodriguez and Wallace Rodriguez. Civil scrutiny will be applied to their involvement in this matter. Ramona's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief and outrage. Your Honour, this is preposterous. We are respectable members of this community. Silence, Mrs. Rodriguez, the judge commanded, his voice unwavering. Your counsel may address the court. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel fell, a final resounding crack that seemed to shatter the last vestiges of my family's perfect world. Chaos erupted. Alea was sobbing hysterically, Charles trying to pull her up. Ramona was already whispering furiously to their lawyer, her eyes blazing with a desperate, furious energy. Wallace just sat there, defeated. Michelle Peters, the head CPS investigator, walked over to me. Her expression was solemn, but there was a quiet respect in her eyes. Ms. Rodriguez, she said, her voice low. Thank you for your testimony. It was impactful. I just told the truth, I replied, my voice steady. The anger was still there, a simmering ember, but it was overshadowed by a strange sense of calm. This wasn't about petty revenge anymore. It was about something bigger. The truth is often the hardest thing to speak, Michelle said, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips, especially when it involves family. We'll be working closely with Caden's school and the evaluators. Our priority is his safety and well-being. She paused, then added, We'll be looking for a suitable placement for him. Do you have any family members who might be able to provide a safe, stable environment? I looked at my family, still huddled in their corner, their perfect lives crumbling around them. Ramona, obsessed with image. Wallace, enabling and silent. Alea, broken and still seemingly blind to her own complicity. No, they couldn't provide that. Not now. Maybe not ever. I wouldn't press for custody, I said, my gaze returning to Michelle. That's not what this is about. But if there are no other family members who can safely do so, I would be willing to foster Caden, temporarily, until a permanent solution is found. He's my nephew. He deserves a safe place. Michelle's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, then understanding. That's a significant offer, Ms. Rodriguez. We will certainly consider it. We always prioritise family placement when it's safe and appropriate. It wasn't about revenge anymore, not truly. The satisfaction of seeing their perfect world crack was undeniable, yes. But looking at Alea, so utterly lost, and thinking of Caden, a child I barely knew, I realised my motivation had shifted. It wasn't about making them suffer for what they did to me. It was about breaking the chain, breaking the cycle of silence, of cover-ups, of prioritising image over human connection, over a child's safety. It was about ensuring that another child didn't become a victim of their dysfunction. As I turned to leave, Alea suddenly appeared beside me, her eyes swollen, her face streaked with tears. Charles was pulling at her arm, trying to get her to leave. Zoe, she whispered, her voice raw, barely audible. She wasn't looking at me, but past me, as if seeing something only she could. You were always the strong one. We just hated you for it. Her words hung in the air, a chilling confession that explained so much. The resentment, the efforts to control me, to erase me. It wasn't just about my perceived instability, it was about their own weakness, their own fear of my defiance. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say, no forgiveness to offer, just a quiet, resolute understanding. The courthouse doors swung shut behind me, muffling the last echoes of the shattered silence within. I stepped out, blinking into the bright afternoon sunlight. It felt like walking out of a long, dark tunnel. Hayden was waiting on the bench where I'd left him, still engrossed in his drawing. He looked up, his face innocent and bright, and my chest swelled with a familiar, fierce love. He was my compass, my constant. "Mommy's done," I said, scooping him into my arms. He giggled, wrapping his small arms around my neck. As I walked away from the building, the world outside seemed to rush in. A small cluster of reporters, alerted by the unusual nature of the hearing, had gathered near the steps. They spotted my family first, Alea, still sobbing, being half dragged by Charles, while Ramona, her face contorted with fury and fear, tried to push past them, Wallace a grim shadow behind her. "Mrs. Rodriguez, can you comment on the allegations of child neglect?" "Mr. Cooper, are the rumours of domestic issues true?" "What about the former nanny's affidavit, Mrs. Rodriguez?" The questions flew, sharp and relentless, tearing at the carefully constructed facade my family had maintained for decades. They stumbled, tried to deflect, but their usual composure was gone. Their hypocrisy, once a private cancer, was now exposed, raw and bleeding for the world to see. I walked past them, Hayden nestled against me, his head on my shoulder. No one recognised me, the outcast daughter, and that was fine. My victory wasn't in being seen by the cameras, but in the quiet, profound shift that had just occurred. Later that day, I met Freya for coffee. She had been following the news online, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and satisfaction. "Zoe," she said, shaking her head, "I saw the headlines. Prominent family faces child neglect probe. Shocking allegations against wealthy couple. Your mum and dad are going to lose their minds." "They already have," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. I felt tired, but not drained. It was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes after a long, hard fight. The judge ordered wider investigations into them too, for the cover-up. Freya grinned. "Karma's a real bitch, isn't she?" "She is," I agreed, a small smile touching my lips. "And she doesn't forget." We talked for a while about the details of the hearing, about Caden. Michelle Peters had called me earlier, confirming that Caden had been placed in a non-relative foster home for now. They were still assessing my offer to foster him, but the initial focus was on getting him into a stable, neutral environment away from his parents. It was a relief. He was safe. That was the most important thing. The next few days were a whirlwind of media frenzy around the Rodriguez family. Their carefully curated image was shattered. The society pages that once lauded their perfection now dissected their downfall. The public shame was swift and brutal. My phone, however, remained mostly quiet, save for Curtis checking in, and my lawyer, Quinn Bowen, calling. Quinn, 32, sharp and fiercely intelligent, had been an invaluable resource, advising me behind the scenes since Curtis first tipped me off. She'd been in the courtroom, a quiet presence, observing everything. "Zoe," Quinn said on the phone the next morning, her voice calm and professional. "That was quite a show. Your testimony was powerful. And the judge's ruling, it's a significant step. Legally, you're in a very strong position now." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she replied, "that their attempts to discredit you, to remove your son, to paint you as unstable, it's all on record now, against the backdrop of their own proven misconduct. You might have a very strong case for emotional damages, parental alienation, even defamation. It wouldn't be about money for you, I know, but about formal legal vindication. It would solidify your standing once and for all." I considered it. The thought of taking them to court again, not as a defendant but as a plaintiff, was tempting. It would be the ultimate public declaration of my truth. But for now, I just wanted to breathe. Ramona, predictably, tried to regain control. My email inbox started filling up with desperate messages. Long, rambling apologies that weren't apologies at all, but thinly veiled attempts to manipulate, to beg me to fix this. Then came the flowers. Expensive arrangements delivered to my small apartment with cards signed Mom and Dad. I never opened the emails. I never acknowledged the flowers. I just deleted them, one by one. My silence was the purest revenge. It was the ultimate denial of their power over me. They wanted a reaction, a fight, anything to engage me, to make me part of their drama again, but I was done. I was free. I still had my struggles, of course. Life as a single mom wasn't suddenly easy, but the heavy weight of their judgment, their perceived superiority had lifted. I wasn't bitter, not anymore. Just done. The validation I felt wasn't from their downfall, but from the quiet strength I had found within myself, the strength that had allowed me to stand up, to speak my truth, and to protect an innocent child. They taught me love was conditional. Hayden taught me otherwise, and karma doesn't forget bloodlines.